Hello, friends. Welcome. It's another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. My name's Aubri Devashrayee. So I guess we have a ceasefire, and now both sides are saying the ceasefire is broken. So there's so much violent nonsense happening. Nonsense is the least harmful word to use, I guess. All of this unwarranted, illegal, immoral aggression by the US and Israel is unacceptable. So yesterday, I was going over more of the current events. I still want to cover that a little bit, get a quick update, but for today, mostly I want to focus on organizing. Something that I pushed off yesterday in order to go over that stuff, so we'll be doing that today. I also have banned book club planned, so we read chapters 16 and 17. We'll go over that. I want to go over the writings of Rousseau, I guess one in particular, that I'm going to be reading in my lovely copy of the Communist Manifesto and other revolutionary writings. So that's exciting. And then that will lead into the Scarlet Pimpernel. That aristocratic propaganda that we're deconstructing. So, reading the writings of Rousseau will provide some context, like the writings of Voltaire did that we went over yesterday. But I will continue to compare and contrast the circumstances that happened during the French Revolution and what's happening now. And we'll talk about other revolutionaries like Emiliano Zapata. We're going to watch a video by Prince Shakur. He has some amazing content. Highly recommend subscribing to him on his YouTube channel. And talking about direct action, there is a series that Prince Shakur has started about direct action and organizing. So I want to explore that because this is how we take our power back, by educating ourselves, understanding history, what has been effective in moving the needle for social change, holding leaders accountable. So we'll go over that and then talk about Rousseau and the French Revolution, also in relation to organizing and how that functioned. Yeah. There also is this FD signifier video. It's FD streams because he did it streaming. It's called Influencers Are All Insane. And I want to watch that as well. So we'll see what he has to say about that. I'm very intrigued. But to start off with, I wanted to watch some humorous videos, as I do, before we get into the serious stuff, the bullshit, if you will, of current happenings. But this is just a reminder, if you are aware of any sort of mutual aid networks, collectives, to be getting involved, looking for protests to protest this unwarranted, evil war against Iran, and all of the evil that's happening at home with this fascist regime kidnapping, trafficking of human beings to these concentration camps where people are dying in custody of ICE. So we need to present a united front against this. It really is concerning how fractured the political, social landscape is in the US. It's really difficult to have conversations with people about what's happening in politics. That there are many people, because of these algorithms and the media being captured by these billionaire oligarchs who have ingratiated themselves with the administration and who are part of the industrial war complex, that they are making it so some people are just entertained into this ignorant stupor. So that's a little bit of a reason why I'm even embarking on this whole thing. I don't pretend to have the answers to everything, and I'm not going to also pretend to be an expert on organizing, but just trying to spread some education and advocacy, like the intro says, for better or worse. But we need to take our power back as people, because our representatives are not leaving us. They're still on vacation, out of session. That is so absurd that we have this war that is illegally being pursued, instigated by the president and his imbecilic cronies. So we'll be talking about what we can actually do, because I think that's important for us to feel empowered. Because as an American people have for a very long time felt like any sort of activism or engagement in politics is meaningless. And this learned helplessness, this disempowerment is because of the years and years of corruption, of corporate interests and donors, lobbyists, being in control of politicians, representatives, having contracts with the government. And we need to center revolutionary optimism. I can struggle with this at times, but it is necessary. And we also need to have some techniques, some areas of recourse, because we aren't going to be getting it from our oppressors. So, shall we get into it? Let's do it. All right. So, I saw these two videos that I'm about to show about Pam Bondi that I found very amusing. So let's give it a watch. Give them a watch, I should say.
It's fine that my picture's in the trash. All pictures end up in the trash someday. Not every photo gets hung in the Louvre. There is no evidence that I'll be disbarred. Epstein files, but don't release anything with my name on it. And I'm like, well, that's impossible because your name's on every page. I redacted all the victims' names, and I redacted his name, which is exactly what he wanted me to do.
Yep.
And how am I rewarded? I'm fired for it, which is fine. Dow was 50,000. Trump told me that he would maybe, probably,
not
possibly,
anymore.
Potentially someday give me a job as a judge. So I have that to look forward to. I'm gonna call Christy Nome and see if she wants to shoot a dog together or something. It's fine that my picture's in the trash. All pictures.
Shoot a dog together or something. I played a video of them, the Butter Faces. They make such incredible content of Christy Nome and her husband and his large ass titties, which, cool, great, enjoy that, be kinky, be a bimbo, be a sissy if you want, but be queer, be a drag queen, however you want to express yourself, but don't be a fucking hypocrite. How about, if you want to engage in this behavior, you don't very overtly oppress other people and use rhetoric that is incredibly harmful to marginalized people. So we see this is a consistent pattern with Republicans, all of these closet cases who have sold out to the system, who think that buy-in and assimilation and conforming will get them the kind of future that they want. And we see how, when this news came out with Christy Nome and her husband, how they were very quick to be thrown under the bus of saying like, oh, we're so ashamed, pray for us, this is evil. And it's like, who the fuck cares? Just don't be a hypocrite. Okay, I just opened this LaCroix and I read an article this morning that's like, There's a lot of evidence showing sparkling water is giving people colorectal cancer. And I'm like, what isn't giving us cancer at this point in the US with all of our food and the pollution, water, basically anything that is surrounding us that we're ingesting is poisonous and probably is giving us cancer. At this point, I'm like, I don't even know how long all of this is gonna last. How long I'm gonna last in this fascist regime. So, whatever. It's not like I'll be able to afford cancer treatment anyway. Go big or go home, I guess. I don't know. That's probably not a good attitude, but as I'm talking about having revolutionary optimism, that doomerism, this is me actively trying to find revolutionary optimism. Okay, so I played a little bit ago that one auto-tune song of the Dow right now is over 50 thou. The Pam Bondi song, incredible, loved it. And now we have an updated version in minor because guess what? Pam Bondi sings the Dow in minor key because she got fired. Yeah. All right, let's listen to it.
The Dow right now is over 50 thou. I don't know why you're laughing. That's what we should be talking about.
Oh, so sad.
The Dow right now. S&P at almost 7 thou. The American people need to know this. Need to know how is the Dow.
Oh, it's ending. Wow.
The Dow right now is over 50 thou.
Dow bad ending. The Dow right now is under 47 thou. Considering what she's trying to cover up, I'm not sure she should be doing anything in minor. But what do I know? The Dow sends their thoughts and prayers after she got fired. All right. Okay, so I saw this update. Normally I try to avoid hearing from Chuck Schumer in general, but this is one of the latest updates that I've seen of saying that the Senate will vote on war powers. I doubt Chuck Schumer is that interested in this. If there is any sort of shift on this position from him, because clearly he's a huge Zionist, is constantly talking about needing funding for Israel, supporting funding for Israel. Juniper, come here. She's meowing outside. Come here, bug. She's just staring. Are you gonna come in? Okay. Don't know what's going on there, but you can come in. Come here. Okay. We'll see what she ends up doing. Yeah, normally I try to avoid watching what he's saying because you can't even trust what he's saying anyway. So I don't put much faith in his intention to vote for a war powers resolution, but he may be getting enough pushback from his constituents where he feels like he has to say something at least. We'll see if he does something. We'll see.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, now let me look at you gotta move this back so I can see it when I...
This is what Sam Cedar does.
Great, thank you.
He always gets out his glasses and does his
Okay,
Chuck
good
Schumer
morning.
impression
Let's
and
take...
goes, the social media. But yeah, even his glasses are trying to escape from proximity to his person.
stock after 39 days of bloodshed, billions of dollars. Let's see where we are after 39 days of this war. Trump's war, with a price tag of $44 billion and $4 gas, made us worse off today than we were when he started it. And let's go over
Look at
this
this
piece by
sign.
piece. Why are we worse off today than the day he started?
Worse. Worse.
First,
Worse.
the Strait of
Worse.
Hormuz. It's in worse shape today.
The way that all representatives seem to have an unlimited budget for poster boards, imagine how much money could be sent towards constituents and social programs just from the poster board budget alone. How much does this actually add? That's what I want to know. Because a lot of the time, it just is for show. It's not like instructive or helpful, in my mind.
With more Iranian domination of it than it was before the war started. Iran has now demonstrated to the whole world
She decided to
that
come
it can use
in.
the Strait of Hormuz
Hi, Buck.
as leverage against
Come here.
the international community.
Yeah.
In terms of what Trump has described of this 2-week ceasefire, in terms of even when that holds, the strait is only partially open for 2 weeks, and it's on a conditional basis. That leverage is not gone. Trump handed to the Iranians leverage over the Strait of Hormuz. So in the short term, we're not in much
There
better
she
shape, and in
is.
the long term, we're in much worse
Hi,
shape
Teeny.
when it comes to all the oil that has to go out of the
Yeah, you
straits.
can sit here.
Second,
There you go.
the Iranian regime. Iran still has an Ayatollah named Khamenei.
Let's speed this
The
shit up.
Iranian regime is still standing, not just standing, but now emboldened. And the regime is likely to be even more radical and more dangerous than it was before. So it's worse. Trump's Iran war has strengthened the Iranian regime and made the United States position worse. Gas prices. At home here, American families have paid the price for this war. Gas prices have skyrocketed in just a matter of days. They're not going to change until August. And in general, the world oil markets will be unsettled for years. Years from now, several years from now, Americans in the world will still be paying the price. A higher price
Yes.
in gas prices than before the war started. Iran's nuclear ambition, worse. The bottom line is that Iran still has its nuclear stockpile. Its nuclear ambitions. Iran still has its nuclear stockpile. Its nuclear ambitions are still unchecked, if not
Okay.
accelerated. And finally,
Even
American
speeding
credibility.
it up, he's
The
going
nations of the
so
world are furious
slow.
at Trump. The Europeans, the Asians, even the Middle Eastern allies. They say, what the hell is he doing?
This
The United States
gerontocracy has
credibility in the
got
world
to
is badly
go.
worse because of this war. So just in summary, this war has made us worse off today than before it started. The war made us worse in terms of control of the Strait of Hormuz. The war made us worse in terms of the strength of the Iranian regime. The war made us worse in terms of high gas prices. The war made us worse because Iran's nuclear ambitions have been unchecked. And the war made us worse because American credibility is down the drain.
You've already
incredible.
said that,
This is one of
Chuck.
the very worst military and foreign policy actions that the United States has ever taken. And of course, there are other points here. Brave American
Are
soldiers
there?
have died. Many remain in harm's way. All of this happens when one man, especially a man acting as unhinged as Donald Trump, has unchecked power to wage war. He backs himself into a corner with dangerous, escalating rhetoric. The entire world holds its breath, wondering what's next going to come out of his mouth. And can he ever find a way out? A commander-in-chief who is truly in control would never have gotten into this colossal mess to begin with. That is exactly why I'm announcing that today, the Senate will vote next week on the War Powers Resolution. Congress must reassert its authority, especially at this dangerous moment. No president, Democrat or Republican, should take this country to war alone. Not now, not ever.
And next week, because they're on vacation. Why is it that Congress has way more vacation time than any of their constituents could ever dream of? That they actually have health care, they actually have security for their families, they have benefits, they get paid a livable wage. I know many people have been saying this for a long time, but representatives should be forced to experience the conditions of their most marginalized constituents, which means they would probably have to experience like prison and homelessness. And that would be incredibly good for them because we would see a rapid improvement in the material conditions that they refuse to engage in because they are bought and sold by all of their donors and lobbyists and corporate interests. So that's my take. They really, it really is absurd how much time off they have. That it's not going to be until next week. Mike Johnson is refusing to have people come back into session. It is completely absurd.
Republicans will once again have the opportunity to join Democrats and end this reckless war of choice. The public must demand that Republicans join with us to approve the War Powers Act. The War Powers Act will cease hostilities and require the administration to get...
Will you actually try to whip votes, Chuck?
...to war after the hostilities cease. And the bottom line is this. From day one, this war has never had a satisfactory answer to what is the goal, what do we want to achieve, what is the timetable, how much will it cost in both lives and treasure. He has never had an answer. In fact, his answer varies from day to day to day. It almost looks as he wakes up in the morning, looks at the oil market and the stock market and determines that day's actions over in Iran. It's erratic, but worse than erratic, it's dangerous. Let this be a warning. If Trump starts a new war, we will be in worse shape, given his lack of planning and focus. Trump must end the war now. The only viable solution...
If he starts a new war, we're in a war.
Ceasefire, especially when it's fragile as this, is not a strategy. It's not a diplomatic solution. It's not a plan. Trump needs to stop posting on the social media and start doing the hard work of building a lasting peace. Trump chose this war. He owns the consequences. And
he's going to do it now.
Has the opportunity to act to make sure it cannot happen again. Ready for your question.
Even has his hands on his hips.
Thank you, sir. With respect, of course, the administration sounds almost triumphant about the war, insisting that all U.S. objectives have been achieved, with minimal losses. What's your response to that? And I have a follow-up.
What? My response to that is just look at the actual results, not the BS that comes out of the administration.
The BS. Oh, he's angry.
Iran's nuclear ambition, we're in worse shape. American credibility, we're in worse shape. This war is a colossal failure. And as I said, Trump should end the war now. The only viable solution is a lasting diplomatic one.
And sir, follow-up, if I may, yes. As the hours ticked by yesterday, with the potentially catastrophic threat on the table, what, if anything, did you do to counsel the president, to counsel the White House?
We publicly and privately told the White House just what we've said here. Any other questions?
Did you speak directly with the president?
No.
Did you try to?
We spoke through the administration. The president was not available.
Hello, Night Nalav. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Okay.
Support journalism, you try.
So, like I expected, we didn't really get much from good old Chuck. This was me doing my impression. They have another board. I know, all of these representatives. The budget they have for poster boards is insane. It could probably, feed a lot of school children. Last time it did a world tour. One of the poster boards. Okay, I'm done with that bit. All right, this is a video that I saw came out by FD Signifier on his FD Streams account. Influencers are all insane. And I'm very curious as to what he has to say. Oh, you know the tariff one. Oh, yep.
It's hard being a creator.
They are obsessed with those poster boards. It really is how much money do they have budgeted for that shit? Because a lot of the time it's not even that illustrative or educational or helpful to their points. It's just repeating what they say, and yeah. It's how else could we be using this money? How are you doing, by the way?
This is first world problems. My lobster's too buttery, right? So I do want to be clear about that. My lobster's too buttery. My hot dog buns are too toasty. My steak is too juicy, right? All that said, it is hard being a content creator pretty much across the board. I won't say especially on YouTube, but I do think YouTube has a higher standard than other spaces. I've seen YouTubers be more successful in shorts media than I've seen shorts media people switch to YouTube. And part of it is because, except for the Mr. Beast types, the big problem for a lot of actually artistic creators that actually are talented, that actually have something to say, is ironically that they're unwilling to figure out how Mr. Beast does what he does. We clown Mr. Beast, and we should, for his bereft of artistic quality content, for making highly popular, highly effective slop. There's 100 videos that explain the nature of what Mr. Beast does. A really good essayist is working on something about him that I can't wait to see. That's all true. However, the thing that you do have to not give to Mr. Beast, but take from Mr. Beast is his willingness to engage with the platform as a
just there to make everyone read it and hear it at the same
of
time, so they don't just
distribution,
passively
not
listen,
just
but
a
read and
platform
do
where you put your
something.
art. Does
No,
that make
it's true,
sense? YouTube
because
is unique.
especially
Every
people
other
are not
social media
really
platform,
interested in listening.
Twitch,
It's
TikTok,
for like, yeah, visual representation of what they're saying. But a lot of the time it's like not even that, it doesn't even really get to the main points, is what I'm saying. Is that like, they spend a lot of money on these and they could be improved, but yeah.
Instagram, etc., you are either immediately put into an infinite scroll, or you have to have followed it from other social media. You have to like somebody just said, Twitch has no discoverability. OnlyFans, I found out, has no discoverability. I didn't even know that. But YouTube, they give
Doesn't
you
have to
thumbnails.
just need to be
YouTube
visual. Yeah.
still puts the power of choosing what you watch into the hands of the user. I can reload this and it might be something different, but it might not. It's still just choose. Do I want to hear Trump say something crazy again for the umpteenth hundredth time? I'm gonna come back to that. Can we stop reacting to Donald Trump saying crazy stuff like it's news? I'm so tired of y'all. Do I want to watch Nicholas?
I feel so called out. Reacting to some things that Trump says. I mean, his genocidal threat yesterday, I think we needed to take seriously, of like the possibility of nuclear fucking war. But yeah, constantly just like reacting to what he is doing. I mean, it sucks because he's the president of the United States, so like he has power and influence, unfortunately. So like he controls a lot of our material conditions. But yeah, like focusing on more proactive measures, I think, is more productive. Which is why we'll be talking about more organizing today.
Wilson talk about RZA. I don't even know who this is. CJ the X made this video already and it was probably better. Do I want to watch more Fear and Hunger stuff? Lindsay Ellis dropped the video. You know, people didn't know Afro Man was MAGA. How didn't y'all know that a dude that called himself Afro Man that dressed in American flags was MAGA? Y'all should have caught that one. I've taught y'all nothing. The Lupe Fiasco video, I've changed the thumbnail every week for almost 2 months. And somebody came in the comment section on like this 5th, 6th thumbnail change and said,
you know, I usually don't like clickbaity thumbnails like this. You should have
The
more
editing.
confidence in your content and respect for your art.
and like I almost cursed dude out in the comment, like, nigga, what the fuck you talking about? Shut the fuck up. Don't nothing bother me more under any situation than people telling other people how to do something
I mean,
that
that is
they
enough to
don't and
call
have never done.
whatever.
If your job is X and I have never done X,
And judge him
please
unable
smack
to
the
be
shit
in
out of me if I
function.
come to you and say, why aren't you doing X like this? Because I probably don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And most people don't. It's really
Yeah,
frustrating.
he needs to be removed.
I don't know if it happens everywhere. It probably doesn't
Impeached,
happen to like
convicted,
doctors.
removed.
Nah, it probably happens to doctors
And
these days, low-key.
sadly, we don't
But it
have
happens to like a lot
people
like certain
around
types of
him in the
professions where
administration
people
that seem
just
that
assume they
interested
know. They'll just say
in
stuff.
doing
And so
that.
this dude's like,
The 25th Amendment.
The thumbnail was too clickbaity, mind you.
Our representatives
the
are
Lupe
not in
Fiasco
session
video is
right
going
now
on,
because
it's
Mike
8 months
Johnson
old.
is trying to
So
keep
after
people out.
8 months, this dude clicked
So
the
this is
video.
why they have to feel
Because I
pressure
changed the
from
thumbnail. And then had the
us
nerve
everyday
to come to me
people.
and say,
They have to
this
be afraid of
thumbnail
us.
was too clickbaity. Nigga, it was
and what
effective.
we will
You
do
watched and
if
you
he
commented.
remains in
That's
power.
a win. That's a W. The thing is, people say they don't like clickbait, yet Mr. Beast is the #1 most watched creator on the platform. So you may not like clickbait. Some of y'all may not like clickbait. I don't like clicking a video thinking it's going to do X and it does Y. Like, I don't like when I click on a video and it doesn't actually satisfy what I thought it was going to do. But this idea that people don't like, that clickbait turns people off of videos, is just false. It's just not true. And I won't even call it clickbait. It's just knowing what an appealing thumbnail looks like. This thumbnail right here, the OG Lupe Fiasco thumbnail, I love so much. It is so unhinged and weird. This is the OG thumbnail. That one over there. That's the OG Lupe Fiasco thumbnail. And I love it so much. It's so unhinged. It perfectly encapsulates the essence of the video. It has all these other visual elements to it. I paid, I think, $350 to get it done, and it bombed. It bombed. And that happens. That's part of the game. And so I changed it to a whole bunch of other stuff. I made so many good videos last year, and a lot of them did not do as good as other videos.
I don't like X videos at all.
But I was like, hey, we gotta get back.
Like on X, the
I
site?
had a new thumbnail within an hour. Getting back to my original point. I'm rambling. What I'm trying to get across while talking about all of this is that we would do well for people to understand how the platforms actually work. So people don't understand how the platform works. And then creators are people. And so if you don't come into the genre, if you don't come onto the platform with a strong understanding of how it works and what the mechanics are, you'll just do stuff. And there's really, really talented people that just aren't, everybody takes L's on stuff every once in a while, but you just don't know what's gonna work if you don't understand the frameworks and you aren't willing to engage in them. Because I can change this thumbnail 1,000,000 times and you can have an
Isn't it
attitude
what he talked about?
being clickbaited or some shit. It doesn't
Is that a
change the
particular
fact that this is a
creator?
book cover. What matters is what's inside the video. It's something I said in the old video.
Yeah,
If
he's
you click
talking
the
about
video and you watch
clickbait
it,
specifically.
shut the fuck up if you liked it. But people don't understand
But maybe
that
I'm
aspect of the game.
misunderstanding.
And I really wish people did. I wish people were nicer. Remember the slop channel I reacted to? This video right here? I am never doing this again. You know why? Y'all don't know how to act. Probably not y'all. I'm gonna say, his people didn't come for me. His people didn't come for me. Y'all came for him, and I did not appreciate it. I went to his, because he made another video, right? I didn't even watch the response video, because I went to the comments on the original video, and I don't know who these people are, but I disavow. I don't want nothing to do with y'all.
Oh,
Because I do
okay.
not
X
want
and Y
people
videos.
going to people's
Okay,
channels
sorry. I didn't pick
and
up on
fighting
your
with them,
joke.
especially people that's what they are. Folks was in his
I get
comment
it now.
section, and mind you, I don't like anybody being harassed by people that call themselves defending me. That's not a thing I like, period. I hate it when you're doing it, especially for your own enjoyment, and then the person is actually, this is what they want. It does boost the channels, but that's neither here nor there half the time. Sometimes you can't, I knew that was gonna happen. That dude responded to every negative comment in his comment section. He was in there like swimwear. I've had people, say the wrong thing about me and get beat up in their comment section. I felt bad about it. But like in that one, I was like, hey, this is stimulation to him. He's sparring. This is what he wanted. I don't like that because it intertwines the channels. So now my audience is connected to their audience. My audience and their audience are one and the same now. Becca Dactyl says, saw that on YouTube. I could have sworn in that video you told us not to do exactly that, but maybe I just assumed a no harassment cause. I had to find out through experience that the reality is, again, going back to being a content creator is hard. People are gonna do what they wanna do. I was talking to Lil Bill about this. You have to be careful about what topics you cover and what you say. I was really conflicted about Magger Please. Man, that's really funny. Should I do it?
That is really funny.
This thumbnail. Now,
It's hilarious.
I did it
And the
anyway.
video is
Why?
great.
Because it's too funny. But I sat there for a second thinking, am I being irresponsible with my platform? Because somebody, some white person or non-black person is gonna want to take this and run with it. Like we had the whole drama, somebody calling a black ICE agent the N-word, and it's like, hey, it's fuck ICE, but you don't have to call them. It's like, we don't know.
Yeah,
That's not
exactly.
how this works. But once you click upload, it's no longer yours, and you can't dictate what people do with it. The only thing you can control is what you upload. I constantly have people I would like to respond to, constantly have people I would like to call out and make videos about and talk shit about. But the reality is that's never an actual solution to a problem that people are presenting. more than likely, there's always for every, if I have 1 million, I think I'm pushing 1.2 million subscribers on the main channel. And then if you count 300,000 other subscribers to my other channels that aren't even subscribed to the main channel, right? So let's say I have 1.5 million subscribers. There are hundreds of thousands of people within that group that just are here to watch things burn. They're just here for the chaos.
Thanks for being here.
Here to
It
see
was
if
good
I'm
chatting
ever
with
going
you
to
for a
re-enter
sec.
my drama era. And so they do not care if I say, hey, don't go harass this person.
Take care.
I still need to say it. And every once in a while, I'm going to have to say something to somebody. You have to pick and choose your battles, or you become the drama. Dimples D. Nice says you're not wrong, drama sells. No, actually. Drama sells when you can't do nothing else. When you're not that creative, when you're not that interesting.
Yeah, picking your battles. This is something that I'm learning, especially with uploading things to YouTube now. And like I had a couple of people comment on some things, but one in particular without, like, it was very clear they hadn't watched or engaged with any of the content. They just came in saying like, you're not a revolutionary, you're a counterinsurgent, you're fighting against the left, and people like you need to be purged. And it's like, how do you even know what I stand for and what I'm advocating for if you aren't actually listening or watching any of this? Because then you would know that I agree with all of your points. It's just like so absurd to me. But I think it really is just about picking your battles and like what is worth it and what's not. Did you think about the GeoGuessr idea? I did. I think that sounds really fun. I think I'm going to incorporate it more like on Fridays before Culture Corner. What do you think about that?
When you're not that talented, but you have the spirit to do drama, it'll sell for you. It'll sell better than whatever else you was trying to do. You got to keep it going. And eventually it comes back to you, and eventually you become just this like Shadow Colossus. This is what happens when you do drama, right? This is every drama YouTuber creator over the course of their career, right? The longer you do it, the worse it corrupts you until you become a weirdo drama vampire creepazoid freak. This is what happens. The more you do drama,
seems nice.
And if you think about
I'm probably going to be
all of the
horrible
creators,
at
even
it,
some of them I
but
fuck with.
I mean,
All the
you've been
creators you
doing
can
it.
think
Maybe you
about
could
that
like
are
give me some
constantly in
hints
drama.
or tips.
Think about how they started and where
It's a
they
good
are
idea.
now. There you go. This is the end result. This is it. This is a drama creator after 2 years. You're just a creepy weirdo guy with horns and bad skin. I've learned this myself. Like,
and
this
bad
is you.
skin.
This is you after YouTube drama. All your implants
Why not
start
do
breaking down in
culture
your
from
face.
a few countries that you've
Your eyes
just
turn
explored?
red. And the irony
Ooh,
is,
that's
it's so
interesting. I like
It's
that
so funny.
idea.
I
I'll
haven't
think
talked
about
it in a
that
while.
too.
But the irony is,
You
the
have some
person
great
that
ideas.
helped me learn this lesson is a person that is struggling with this lesson themselves.
Also,
right
I've
now and
updated
recently.
the
And that is
Discord
one
more.
Hassan Piker. On an old video, the last real drama video
I have a Google
I made,
sheet.
Hassan said some shit that changed my perspective.
A Google
This
sheet
is
of
how you use
everything that you
music
guessed
to help convey
GeoGuessr?
some shit. So I got into some drama with
Or
some
a
creators.
Google
This is
sheet of
DJ
ideas?
Mule. Go watch the video. Shout out DJ Mule.
What I think a fucking piece of shit.
From Mule's perspective, however, Xander Hall and many within his community.
I'm just going to be honest with you, immensely valuable. A lot of people don't have that. You should absolutely lean on that as best as you can. Like they will 100% like bring you back to reality where you're like, why the fuck am I talking about some fucking nerd? Like some 20-year-old nerd with no life experience who's only been behind a fucking camera giving me grief about something that they misunderstood. Like that is, you should snap out of it in that moment.
But I want to be clear. W Hassan for that one, because when he told me, I never forget when he told me that, and that's why the music cut the way it did. Because like in this whole section, I'm talking
that
about
is
the
good
drama I got
advice.
involved in.
I have to say.
And going back and forth, and it's like fuck this guy, fuck that guy, whatever. And we're playing down for my niggas. But
That's what I did with my partner of like with this interaction that I had with on one of the videos where I was like upset because I was like, if they listen for 1 second, they would understand that I actually agree with all of the criticisms that they are bringing up or all of the points or things that they say they stand for. But like people are not willing to like put in the work, I guess. And it was like an extensive explanation of what was going on to my partner. And I'm like, you know what? It's just not worth it. I'm just not going to engage anymore because like if someone is just wanting to fight, then they're just wanting to fight. But if someone is like actually willing to engage in good faith, then I'll engage with them. But it's not worth like feeding that if they aren't even going to listen in the first place. Trying one single country is way harder than the whole world. Oh, of hints and tips. Ooh, that's cool. You're dedicated. I'm impressed.
Was that C murder? You know if you know. And then Hassan,
yeah,
I remember
you
during the
could be
interview,
of great help for me.
And Hassan was like, listen to your wife, bro. And I was like, damn. I made a rule after that. If I was mad about something on the internet, and I explained it to my wife, and explaining it to my wife made me look like a fucking weirdo. Take a step back and be like, oh shit, never mind. And just go on. He said he saw his alternate timeline self in me.
It's great advice.
2023, a little over 3 years ago. And ever since I've been
you got it from another streamer. Because there are some people that are so good at that.
And I can think of so many people. Shout out.
They're just locked in.
Because I love his videos. Shout out and praise the shadow.
Okay, amazing. Like Thank you.
Really awful drama. It must have been like a
if you want to include that in like like video ideas, whatever that channel is.
Really killed him.
And if you have any other ideas for the Discord,
but he makes very, very good videos about horror stuff. Another
feel free to
white
include
boy
them.
I usually appreciate. This dude has lost his mind. And this is another example. Flesh Simulator. Looks like, I guess he took his videos down for a second, but
I don't know
he put
who
them back
this
up.
is, who he's talking about.
I enjoy like observing clearly unhinged, quasi-scary, crazy white people from a safe distance. That is a favorite pastime of mine. He has some really good videos, but somebody has people trolling him on Twitter, something. I honestly have no clue what's happening with him. No clue. Whatever it is not going well for him. And that's kind of the thing that happens is people will get sucked into their own online world and not realize that their online world is dumb and they need to stop. Your feed is not the world.
Just keeping perspective. Okay. Called out a bit. I feel a little called out, but that was good for me. Good for me to hear. Okay. So here is this video on Emiliano Zapata talking about the Zapatista movement, how he was able to organize and build a revolutionary movement that was focused on solidarity and protecting people, having dignity, having economic autonomy. So let's give this a watch. And I think it's in Spanish, so...
Emiliano Zapata nació el 8 de agosto de 1879.
Here, I'm gonna do this.
The second to last of Gabriel Zapata's 10 children. At age 16, he was orphaned, but not defenseless. Zapata always took pride in earning his own living. He was neither a day laborer nor poor. He had his own farmland, his stable, and a team of pack mules. Zapata knew from a young age the problems of his native Nenilco, a town of pre-Hispanic origin that had been left without land due to the advance of the haciendas of Coahuila, the hospital, and Mapaslan. Its inhabitants had been forced to work for the haciendas or rent their land. In mid-1910, when the hospital hacienda refused to farm its land, the situation of the town's peasants reached its limit. Emiliano Zapata, who was already the authority of Nenilco, decided to occupy it by force.
Zach.
Zapata's
hello,
Raiders.
Welcome.
Against the Chinameca estate and its hated administrator. The seizure of the estate.
We're currently watching this mini documentary on Emiliano Zapata, the Zapatista movement, his life, how that all got started. Hello, Zeoduck. Is that how you say it? Naps with cat. I have a cat on my lap right now. Junk Saint, welcome. Good to see you.
State turned into a bloodbath. Zapata's army grew with thousands of peasants who preferred to go to the mountains rather than continue living the humiliations
What were you
they
all
suffered at the hands of their superiors,
learning about
soldiers,
today
and
on
rural
Zach's
workers.
channel?
The dictatorship was faltering. I was calm until the South rose up, Porfirio Diaz later commented. Days after Emiliano Zapata took Cuautla, Diaz resigned from the presidency. The leader of the revolution, Francisco I. Madero, had agreed to a transition within the institutions when signing the peace agreement, something difficult to understand for a
Everything.
triumphant revolution. Zapata, of course, did not understand
Fuzzy
why Madero
numbers.
did not immediately take
Hello,
power and allow the
welcome.
interim president who was notoriously
Not
opposed
sure,
to the
just turned
revolution
up
to
at the
govern.
end. Okay,
Nor
fair,
did he
fair.
understand that his men should demobilize and surrender
But,
their weapons
I
to
mean,
the army they had defeated,
Zach
much less that the return
really
of the
makes
lands for which they
great
had fought
content,
should be
so it's solid, whatever it is.
Madero and Zapata met several times throughout the second half of 1911. Madero tried to
Welcome,
convince him to
comrades.
dismiss his troops and wait for the legal resolution of their demands. Zapata rejected what he called a half-revolution and insisted on the immediate restitution of the lands. The newspapers constantly attacked the caudillo, whom they called a bandit and the Attila of the South. When Madero became president in November 1911, after democratic and fair elections,
That
his
revolution?
relations with Zapata had
What?
irreparably deteriorated. Zapata responded by proclaiming the Plan of Ayala, in which Madero was repeatedly called a traitor. There began a new war for Zapata, a war without quarter against everything and everyone.
So this is just par for the course when it comes to this building of revolutionary movements, of the powers that be. Oh yeah, thanks for being here, Night Nawab. I saw your Discord. I'll be sure to look at that. Thank you. Take care. I think he said half revolution, but I heard hat. A hat revolution? What would that consist of? What would that consist of? It's more than just like the pussy hats, like the vulva hats. Probably just as many sombreros. True. Yeah. Just traditional hats, probably. Like indigenous cultural hats. But yeah, this is par for the course when it comes to the powers that be resisting what these revolutionaries, people who are engaging in direct action, activism, that they are constantly trying to smear people and portray them as terrorists, when in actuality, people have been forced into this position because of these oppressive powers, just continually deteriorating material conditions for people. It's a pretty good signifier, a good hat, isn't it? True. White hat, black hat, all of that.
Under the coup regime of Victoriano Huerta,
Zapatistas. Yep, exactly.
Unprecedented violence took
Yeah,
place
so
in
this
Morelos.
is some
When Huerta
lynchings
resigned
that
and the
happened.
revolutionaries from the north took over.
Yeah, talking about the historical background of Emiliano Zapata. Giant sombrero competition. I would take that any day. That sounds incredible over like all of this potential nuclear bullshit that is being threatened these days by our genocidal, maniacal president.
Over Mexico City, they took care to prevent the Zapatistas from attempting to take the capital.
I want to see Trump flexing
Zapata's
the
disagreement with the
largest
leader of the
hat. He
Constitutionalists,
recently was wearing a
Venustiano
cowboy
Carranza,
hat
was almost
in
immediate.
the Oval Office,
The
and it looked
revolutionary
so
generals held a
absurd on
convention in
him.
Aguas Calientes that attempted
So
to resolve
he's
the problems
part
that were
of the
already
way
evident
there.
among them. Zapata did not attend the meeting, but instead sent the intellectuals who supported his movement. With the support of Francisco Villa, the convention accepted Ayala's plan and broke with Carranza's support. A new war, a civil war among the revolutionaries themselves, loomed on the horizon. Venustiano Carranza was forced to retreat to the port of Veracruz. In the meantime,
that is also something that hinders revolutionary movements, activists in general, is just infighting, people not being able to agree on things. We see this with every single movement, but a lot of the time too, there is dissent that is sown by the powers that be through these undercover operatives in order to make it so that people are not as effective. Trump Ranch's new venture, probably. Yeah, it's probably just, I mean, it's all evil shit that he's up to. He'll be viewed as Nero one day. Yeah, I cannot wait until that day comes. It's scary too because J.D. Vance is the vice president and he is the puppet of Peter Thiel, who is extremely dangerous. So, like, we're fucked. We're just fucked, which is why we have to protect our own. We have to be the ones to save ourselves because we see how unwilling our representatives are to engage in a meaningful way in resistance. I'd rather have Nero. I mean, at this point, it's looking that way.
Villa and Zapata
He at least didn't
advanced
have
to meet in
access to
Mexico City
nukes.
On December 4th, 1914. Zapata and Villa entered the National Palace in triumph with the president appointed by the convention, Eulalio Gutierrez. Both came from the people and represented their deepest demands, but at the same time they were radically different. Villa loved power, while
The
Zapata
mustache
had an almost
game
physical version
with
of
these
politics,
revolutionaries
which he
is
considered
really
a group
strong.
of greedy and traitors. Despite their promises to establish a more lasting alliance, it proved impossible for both. Zapata returned to Morelos, and while the Carrancistas concentrated on confronting the great military threat of Villismo, he experienced a moment of peace in his state. Tlaltizapan became the capital of the revolution. The ascendant class had disappeared and Morelos was an independent state. Zapata made his revolutionary utopia a reality. The lands were distributed according to the uses and customs of the people. Democracy was exercised locally and directly. His concerns were
advocating
more moral
for
than
the people
economic,
who
land and
work
freedom.
the land should
In mid-1915,
own the
the
land.
resounding defeat of Francisco
And
Villa marked the
that
beginning
continues
of the
to be
Zapatista revolution
a
in
principle that
Baton.
should be true.
The constitutionalists were now able to concentrate on Morelos. After passing an amnesty law with some success, General Pablo Gonzalez and his 30,000 men repeated the methods of Juvencio Robles to eliminate the Zapatistas: looting, assassinations, deportation of entire populations, and destruction of property. In June 1916, he took the headquarters of Tlaltizapan and killed 283 people. Zapata responded with bombings on the railroad tracks near the capital, in Xochimilco and Xoco. In early 1917, he managed to reclaim the state, but in August, Pablo
Guerrilla
Gonzalez
tactics.
resumed his campaign against the armed peasants.
Fighting back with the
besieged
avenues that we
Zapatistas did
actually
not surrender.
have that are
For much
available
of
to us
1918, they
when we're so
maintained their headquarters
disempowered.
in Tlaltizapan, but Pablo Gonzalez's cold professionalism
Look at
and the
his
Spanish flu
sunglasses.
epidemic gradually
Oh, that's
thinned their
fierce.
ranks. In need of allies,
It's
the
amazing how little we
ever-distrustful
learn
Emiliano
about
Zapata
Mexican
believed in
history.
the offers of
Exactly.
support from one of
Especially
Pablo
in the
Gonzalez's
US,
subordinates,
we don't
Colonel
learn
Jesus
basically anything
Guajardo
meaningful
gave him a
about
horse,
foreign
the Ace of
policy or
Gold,
world
and invited him
history,
to the
to be
Chinamecan
honest.
state to hand over the weapons and
We're
join
just
his men.
so deeply
Zapata did not
uneducated,
enter
and that's
Chinameca
intentional
immediately,
because
but
of
in
the
the end he decided
imperialist
to do so. A
propaganda.
bugle sounded 3 honor calls.
But yeah, there are plenty of
The last
things
was the signal
that
for the
we
men of the traitor
could and
Guajardo,
should be
who had
learning
stood
from
guard
that
to
we
receive
don't.
Zapata, to open their rifles on him. It was April 10, 1919. Zapata was defeated and died by treachery, but many of his ideas and his own agrarian law of October 1915 were a fundamental precedent. Of Article 27 of the 1917 Constitution.
He really photographs well too, looking very fierce. Let's see what the comments say. Emiliano Zapata wasn't seeking power, he was seeking justice. Yes, like what I was saying, the land belongs to those who work it. Exactly. As an Argentinian, I'm proud to know that someone like that was Latina. She had more courage than anyone. Or him, I guess. I want to die a slave to principles, not to men. Damn. Even Hollywood dedicated a film to our General Zapata, with Marlon Brando himself playing him. The film is called Viva Zapata. I didn't know that. I mean, that's problematic that Marlon Brando was playing a Mexican. Just once again, white people up to bullshit, whitewashing historical figures, which is why we can't rely on the 1% and people who control these things for any sort of sense of morality. Okay, so moving along, talking about direct action, something that the Zapatistas were very engaged in, still are very engaged in, because that movement is continuing. This is Prince Shakur. He has some amazing content that is really focused on direct action, community organizing, and he talks to a lot of incredible people. So I've been wanting to watch this. It's an hour long, and luckily, I think we're doing pretty good on time today. So let's see what he has to say.
That people have when considering or getting into direct action or organizing is, how do you field the opinions of other people that have done it in the past? And what kind of questions would you ask those people? Today's video in the Direct Action 101 series is going to be exactly just that. And in this Direct Action 101 series, we're breaking down the different methods of direct action, the tactics and histories behind them. And I wanted to sprinkle a few videos throughout this series where we talk to organizers and I let y'all ask some questions that have been on your mind about direct action and organizing. So this video is going to be in 2 parts. The first part is going to be with revolutionary and video essayist Lucretia McEvil. Lucretia has been
Did you
on my
see her
podcast, The
shirt?
Dugout,
Just said
before.
bitch everywhere.
They're a really
Oh,
cool
I love
comrade
that.
I think just explains
Or
things
them.
in such a clear
I think
and
they're
matter-of-fact
non-binary.
way, and that's something that's
my
really
bad.
helpful and needed. And part 2 is going to be me talking to the co-host of my podcast, The Dugout, where I ask Jordan a few questions around how did they get radicalized? What are their perspectives on nonviolent versus violent direct action? Thank you for watching this series, and stay tuned for the end for another little message from me.
One of the questions that was asked that I'm kind of interested in, someone at STSU-high asked how to start organizing when you have social anxiety. This was a question that
Bitch everywhere or bitch?
I don't know how to respond to this.
That's a
Then I
good
started reading the
distinction to
zine
be
a
making.
day or two ago.
Just
that kind of
bitch,
gave me a lot of
but
thoughts. But I
written
thought
everywhere.
it
So the
was
word
an
bitch
interesting
was
question,
just
kind of in terms of a lot of stuff that we were talking about before we started this.
all
but
over.
I guess what would your response be to that question? How to start organizing when you have social anxiety?
That's a good question.
We were kind of like touching base on this a little bit earlier, and my first initial thought is that like sometimes
Super
we
fierce.
can
Oh, it's a sweatshirt.
overthink or like have expectations of like who we are
I
supposed to
want
be
one.
like before we even start. So I find that when people hear the word like organize or activist, they think of like Fred Hampton. They think of Huey P. Newton. They think of political prisoners.
True.
They think of putting your life on the line and
Fierce
getting
sweatshirt.
doxxed and
Yeah.
things like that, which are
Completely
all
agree.
possible, but you don't have to invest fully or like dive 100% into anything. You can start organizing by volunteering at your local community fridge or your local info shop like once a week or even once a month if you have less time.
I
And
love
that
that.
is
Talking
organizing.
about
So I think the best way
for
you to
I didn't want to pause on that frame since it was unflattering. Talking about actually helping people to take these steps that are more actionable rather than thinking of like, oh, I have to be at the center of this movement and have to do this, this, and this, as opposed to some examples from everyday life, some simple steps to get started. I love that.
approach it is just meet yourself where you are.
How do you start
where you are, like,
organizing when you have
currently,
social
when it comes to
anxiety?
your capacity, your
I'm listening.
monetary ability, your physical abilities, and start from there. And don't allow your own expectations or the expectations of others to persuade you in any particular direction. Because what I've noticed in my own personal life is when I focus on consistency, that's when I feel less anxious instead of thinking of like the amount of
like, oh, I'm not doing enough, but like if I'm doing a little bit every day, then I feel better. Also because it's math, you know.
Yeah. What I've always kind of worked through anxiety wise in my organizing journey, I guess, is I always try to figure out the source of my anxiety because I feel anxious for different reasons. Like sometimes I'm going a gathering or a meeting and maybe it's a new space and I feel
Solid
anxious
advice.
because
Yeah, I
I have a
agree.
lot of thoughts around meeting a lot of new people and having to expend
Because it is the
a lot of
again, I didn't want to stop on that frame. It is the constant issue or like back and forth, this push and pull when you're involved in activism or organizing, that you aren't doing enough, that there's so much more to be doing. And I really like that of taking these smaller, manageable steps that you can do every day or like whatever your capacity is, and understanding that everyone has a different capacity and that it can change and it does change over time.
social energy.
Just being very
Is it
practical
going to
about
be
it.
like a certain demographic that I don't vibe with? Or is it dangerous or whatever it may be? And if I can identify why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, sometimes I can like name it and remedy some of that. And so, like, for me, if I'm at like a really intense protest and I'm feeling anxious, usually I probably need to talk to someone that I'm there with, kind of let them know how I'm
Advice, I just wanted to catch this. If anxiety comes up, try to be clear with those around you, make them aware. That's great advice, especially with like having someone to go to some of these things. That can make it way less intimidating. It's also just best practice if you're going to a protest to have someone with you so that you can keep track of each other, someone knows where you are. But I love that as well.
feeling and kind of try to create the space. So it's like, if we need to leave based on whatever either of us are feeling, let's kind of set that precedent. If I'm going to like a gathering and I'm anxious about who I'm going to meet or whatever, I usually try to not force myself to over socialize, to try to like push through. Instead, I allow myself to kind of settle in what I'm feeling, either let it pass or I like acknowledge that it's trying to tell me something. Because I do think when I think of like social anxiety, it's either like a to me like a chemical imbalance. Like I don't fucking know where it came from, or it's trying to tell me something. And I think especially when you're organizing, it can be a really good tool or place to practice where it's like, where is this coming from? Because like sometimes if you're at a action and you're feeling anxiety, that's you being aware that the state is watching and something's about to fucking go down. So maybe you should listen to it when it's in that kind of
Yep.
situation. But
Love that. Trusting your intuition, especially when there are people trying to say, like, oh, it's fine. If you do not feel safe, if you are concerned about something, it is best to listen to that. I'm going to start working on this bracelet. I've been working on bracelets for the countries of all these places that the US is being an aggressor to with their imperialist violence. And I'm trying to find a way to like distribute these, sell them somewhere to have the proceeds go to the people that are in these areas. So I have one with the colors of the Palestinian flag, the Sudanese flag, the Congo flag, the Iranian flag, Venezuela, Cuba. These are things I'm working on. So we'll see what I figure out. That's a cute idea. I mean, I don't know. It's hard because, you know, like we can all feel so powerless a lot of the time. And it's like, well, I stream, I like to do stuff with my hands. We'll see how that goes. But thanks.
but yeah, all of your points about like, especially like not having a very particular idea or expectation of yourself. Because for me, any new political space I show up to, I'm always going to enter it
It's such a
more,
cute
not even
emoji.
meek, but more quiet, so I can
I
kind of
love
orient
that.
myself. And sometimes my body reads that as anxiety too.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Just another quick anecdote, like to your point about like your anxiety being a tool of positivity at action. Like that actually happened to me in 2020 for George Floyd. We were marching on I-95 and we shut down the highway literally. And the cops were pushing us off the ramp, like off of I-95.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the time with the people I was with, I just got really anxious because I peeped game. Like
Another
they're
very
moving
cute
us
one.
to get off the highway because they want to do something physical to us.
Are these from Zach?
So at that point, me and my friends were marching for a while. So I told them I wanted to leave, and we ended up leaving. And unfortunately, that's when everyone got pepper sprayed. They like kettled everybody off and pepper sprayed them in a corner. But when you feel those things, like listen to them. Like you could be protecting yourself. You could be protecting others.
Just this one.
It's okay for you to not stay the
Oh,
entire
yeah.
march or the entire action. And
The
that's
little
something I had to
cat in a
learn
towel.
when I first started organizing, because I felt guilt if I left early for some reason, but it's all self-imposed. Like you went.
I love that. I love that advice. That it can be hard to understand what your limits are when you are already in a higher stress situation, when there are these power imbalances with law enforcement, when they are actively being aggressive and escalating things, because that's what cops do. Fuck the police, by the way. And the fact that they listened to their intuition before things got worse is really important. And there can be a lot of guilt of like, if there is this escalation that happens with law enforcement, that there are people being brutalized and harmed, and feeling like you weren't there to experience it also in solidarity. It's like, we also have to look out for our well-being so that we can keep resisting. And so I love that they said it that way, of like, that kind of expectation is self-imposed. There's no like rule that you have to be at a protest for a certain amount of time. Like, doing what you feel is right is really important.
Showed up. Like that's the point of action, is to show your political support, not to stay the longest.
Yeah, that's such a funny quirk in like being an organizer and going to protest. Because I definitely a few years ago I passed that mark where I'm like, if I'm going home, especially if I'm like, I don't know who the fuck is planning this. Like, is it a counterinsurgent? Like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes you just got to be like, no, not for me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay for you to do that too. And like, you're not any less of a comrade if your feet get tired and you want to go home.
Yep.
Or like if you feel unsafe, you want to go home, or if you have like a panic attack and want to
Oh,
leave. Like all of those things are valid, you know?
Yeah.
From
Amazing
Naomi,
advice.
6056. How to concisely and adequately persuade those who agree in principle but disagree on method. This question, when it was sent to me, that was like the first one that
It's a really
stood
good
out
question,
to me, because
too.
we've been saying in conversation back and forth, like this is like my constant thought lately. It's like, how do I organize with people who I don't necessarily get along with or agree with all the time? This author from England called Paul Mason, he wrote about how to defeat fascists, and a large part of the book,
I've been wanting to
and a
read
large
that
part of his
book.
argument, is that there was an
I need to get a
anti-fascist
copy.
coalition, and the easiest way for us to organize a bunch of different ideologies is to focus on our shared goal. And I think that is the most important thing for us to focus on. It can't be just Trump, right? I think
Yes.
that's where the Democrats failed, because
Yes. And where these No Kings protests, I think, are not being focused as much, we need to rally around a cause that isn't just about, we don't want a king, he's bad. It has to be for the people. I think they should be called like We the People protests or something like that. Even though there's so many right-wing people that co-opt that language of We the People, because they love the Constitution, theoretically. But I think that is really poignant. I'm talking about, what do we have to fight for, not just fight against, because that is what activates people. That's what helps people to feel like there is something larger than themselves that they are working towards. I love this video. It's full of such great gems. Please check out Prince Shakur. Subscribe. He has some incredible advice.
It can't be just Trump because it's like Trumpism. It's not just Trump. It's like what he represents is the actual issue. So for us on the true left, it has to be anti-fascism, like full stop. So that way we can organize with communists, Marxists, progressives, even democratic socialists, because they're anti-fascist. You know what I mean? Instead of us being like, well, I want to do it this way or that way. Like, I think that's the easiest way for us to get divided.
It almost makes me think of like, what principles do we agree on? Because if we don't have principles that we agree upon in terms of how we react to or do or don't snitch to the state, that to me is different. You want democratic socialism and I want, I don't know, fucking democratic federalism. I don't even know. Like, and so I think one, it's important to figure out like what the principles are that we agree on, because sometimes we can agree on certain principles and then move from there when there are actually other principles that might be applicable to the ways that we're trying to be in solidarity with each other, to collaborate with each other, et cetera. Thing that I noted when I was thinking about this question is I think there's importance in building direct action based trust and non-direct action based trust. If it's folks that you maybe aren't
let's see this. Advice: the importance of building tactical trust in direct action situations.
Tactically aligned with in
Yeah,
terms of like
especially when
maybe
it
you're
comes
more
to
into
people's
BlackRock and they're
safety.
more into petitioning and canvassing and trying to get certain kinds of city council members into office. Maybe you set boundaries around the kind of political activity you do with people based on their principles, and you don't expose them to methodologies that you do because maybe they're more aligned with the state. I feel like there's like an element of
That's
security
also
culture that
great
can be
advice.
applied there. I was just doing humanitarian aid at the US Mexican border, and there were different groups there that were working together. And one group was way more centered around harm reduction, and another group was like way more religious. Another group was like hippies, but they all were able to help each other out based on their common goal of like opposing border policies and the way that people are like put in harm's way.
And this is something that we see happening on the left a lot, is all of this infighting of a lot of people who are purists and gatekeeping and trying to say like, no, we have to do it this way. And if people don't agree with all of their ideology, them not being willing to engage in organizing together. And it's like, as we see, such as with the concept of unionizing, you need numbers, you need people, and you can agree on certain things that you all are wanting to fight for, like what they're talking about with finding principles of like, we need better working conditions, we need better pay. So if there's some, like in my case, like transphobic, like queerphobic MAGA voter who is, I normally am like, oh, I feel threatened around you. Like, if they are willing to engage in that work and they're going to be respectful, you know, then it means that like we have something in common to fight for. And that's just the practical nature of what it takes in order to actually move the needle with organizing, is being understanding about people's differences, not trying to impose our viewpoints on people, but meeting people where they're at. And hopefully that makes it so we get shit done.
And the differences they did have, to your point, those didn't matter in the space of getting that work done because no one was trying to be an obstacle to anyone else's work. And so I do think there is a distinction of like, do you just disagree on method or tactics, or is this disagreement going to lead to someone trying to sell you out, or you just not being in community with each other, or maybe wanting to work alongside each other, but not wanting to talk about that shit. And so I think it's important to figure out where those lines are. Because even on principle, it's like, you can both be radicals or revolutionaries, but maybe one of your principles is like being a kind person in meeting spaces and making people feel welcome. And for someone else, it's not. And I'm like, that those are certain principles, but they're also different methods, even in terms of how you hold space. And so I think it's definitely because I'm also like, what I'm like, what principle, what methods? I don't know. It's a good question. It's a really good question.
For sure. What are our disagreements? If it if it's like bigotry, absolutely not. And that's like something that I want
Yeah,
to keep
exactly. Like people have to be
clear. Like what I was
respectful.
saying before, it was like all hell broke loose when I talked about collaborating with the
Yeah.
left or like aligning the left. And that was a lot of people's sentiment. They thought that meant I meant collaborating with people that I had ideological differences with. And when it comes to something like that, that's not what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Like I would never organize with a racist or a bigot because that is ideologically opposed to my belief in anarchism that everybody is a dignified human being, you
Yeah.
know, who deserves love and respect and care. So I can't organize with a bigot just off principle because that's my ideology. So it's never them. It's like, yeah, I guess it
Yeah.
really comes down to what are we disagreeing on?
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
it's dangerous
Yeah.
to anybody.
Yeah, because even the
Yeah.
agree on principles, I'm like, some people might lie to you and say they
Yeah.
agree on the principles, and then you figure out later on. Because and earlier this year when I was a part of like the U.S.
Yeah. And on the other hand, I have been in situations where there are people that are like, you need to read this, this, and this before you join our movement or engage in this kind of resistance. And like, while it's good to have people be educated and understand what, you know, you're fighting for, it also should not be a prerequisite in order for people to be engaged, because people may not have the funds to buy books, people may not have the time, people may not even agree with some of these things. It's about finding what you have in common and trying to move the needle there. Some groups don't allow some baby leftists because it's not their job to teach or there's not time. Yeah, exactly. And like that can make sense. Where it's like this also can be like a very deeply personal endeavor of understanding what your own limits are, what you're willing to put up with or not, because it's like there will be some people who are fine with some things and they can do their own work. But yeah, it's about understanding what you are willing to fight for, what you're willing to put up with. And like I said, we shouldn't have to be doing all of this education for people. So like assigning readings to people can be helpful if people are wanting to join a movement, but it also is, we have to take into consideration like the class consciousness of it and what people are able to do. And if they already are not willing to like understand certain things, it's like the reading may not make any sort of difference. So there's definitely some nuance.
Encampment stuff and how I was organizing with folks that were from different economic classes, different identities, and we assumed that we were in solidarity with each other and we assumed that we agreed on principles. But when it came to methodology, the differences in our principles led to differences in our methods. So, like, their principles were like, we need radical revolutionary change, but it needs to be based in like the pursuit of optics, of aesthetics. And that led to them choosing tactics that were less militant, less antagonistic towards the state. And by the end of that experience, I realized like, I don't even know if we agreed on principles when we started out. And so maybe another point of this is doing that temperature check of figuring out if you actually align principle wise and like kind of checking in like throughout the process, because it's always going to change. People are going to reveal themselves to you differently, also based on the context. Because also when people get scared or the state resorts to repression, like sometimes people's principles change.
Yeah, it's a different person that will come out for sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, like those are all very real responses people will have.
From @sun_seeker MKE, and they asked, what are the red canary / markers in historical movements that have signaled that it's time to escalate or even switch tactics? What are ours now, if any? I thought it was interesting because one, it's kind of like, how are we
Just speaking to like the differences that they're just talking about, that we're talking about, if there are people that don't fit into a certain type of movement, yeah, it's okay to say like, no, you're not a good fit for this. Because And it doesn't mean that they can't engage in their own kind of resistance, because people are only willing to accept certain things at a certain time. Maybe they're at a certain journey and they're moving more towards the left. It's good that they're moving that way. We should encourage it. But if they aren't ready to engage in certain kinds of action, then like it's not worth bringing them in and having to educate them. It really comes down to what you are personally able to deal with and like what other people are intent on pursuing as well. So groups should have weekly or bi-weekly meetings on Discord. Ooh, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, just like a constant touch point to make sure that there's communication. That honestly is one of the hardest things to do effectively in organizing, is making sure that there is clear, concise communication, that everyone is on the same page. Just my opinion. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, especially depending on what people are able to do, like their availability.
Measuring the historical moment that we're in. Are we agreed upon what the historical moment is? It immediately made me think of now, like, why is this a moment or a period of time where we should switch our tactics or escalate? The US historically repeats itself. We return to previous structural evils. Cyclical nature in itself means that we have a new opportunity to be antagonistic towards like a previous evil, but we also are simultaneously in a new predicament or time period now. And so we have to find new tactics and strategies. I also think about the fact that the state has its own sociopolitical memory. It has its own capacity to reach back into lessons from the past and like reorient itself. But I guess I'll pull it if we're thinking about tactics and political violence and what is necessary to kind of change our material conditions. I will reference Creating a Movement with Teeth again. I think it was, or maybe I was reading Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, but he talked about how one of the ways that we can destabilize the fascism of the state is through the unpredictability of our tactics and our diversity of methods and the political violence that like regular citizens can kind of enact. We can't.
Yeah, just to like round off my thought of before, is that even if someone does not fit into one particular type of movement, that doesn't mean that there isn't another space for them where they have other people that are more ideologically aligned, especially if they are more sympathetic to the state and the status quo. That if they are engaged in optics, it's like that is an issue. I mean, optics, to be honest, are still important, but like everyone has their own role to play, especially when we like have to consider that we need people on our side. We need people to be resisting in the ways that they can and are able, that we aren't completely giving up on people who have the good intentions to engage, but making it so that they can do it in the space that they feel comfortable in. That's not to like say that we shouldn't be moving further left. You know, it's about meeting people where they are, and if they don't fit into a particular space, being like, oh, this is a better space for you that aligns more with your ideals. Like, here are some things, if you're interested in this movement, that you can check out. If you happen to align more, then you can join us. That, like, there are different ways that people are resisting, and we do need numbers.
Agree to the playing field that the state has established for us. And if we're in a period of time or a moment in human history where we see that the conditions that the state are trying to create for us are changing, I think that also means we need to escalate or switch our tactics. And what that would mean is like Obama won and became president, and that was like its own like sort of forced cultural shift in the US in terms of like we're post-racial. And then Trump was this kind of white lash, and that was a change in conditions. And I think out of out of Trump's first presidency, like there were increased models of like anti-deportation work and mutual aid and community defense that people did deploy. And that was because the changing conditions that the state presented. And I think now, once again, we see a lot of those same conditions potentially coming back. The repression, the bigotry, the fascistic violence, that's also going to increase. And so if our antagonizer is changing their methodology, we also need to change our methodology too. And I think that means we need to understand who our antagonizer is, what tactics they have at their in their tool belt, and what we as communities need to be capable of. Because even yesterday, I sat in on a talk about anti-deportation work, and they talked about like how it's important for communities to look at the different ways that different federal agencies or different federal enforcers work, whether it's ICE or your sheriff's department or your police department.
And this little excerpt. Advice: knowing how the state works can also help us choose or change tactics. Yeah, you have to know your enemy. You have to know how they function, what their intentions are, especially how they operate, and then target their weak points. Which, especially when it comes to like the sprawling, oppressive state, that a lot of this has to do with like contracts. Like, who is contracting with whom? Who are these players that are perpetuating this harm? Like, who are the arms of these operations? And how do we inhibit, stall, stop, sabotage their types of movements, and or whatever the type of oppression that they are engaged with the state, so that you can have direct action against these nefarious forces.
They all wear different things. They operate differently. They come in for different reasons. They're called in for different reasons. And if the new infrastructure of how immigration or deportation is if that's going to happen, it's going to involve a variety of operations and resources that are going to be a shift in process. And so if the state is moving differently, we also have to move differently too. And ideally, I think in George Jackson's kind of perspective, we need to be unpredictable in the ways that we change our tactics and escalate.
Sure, yeah, I definitely agree with that. I read a tweet recently. I forgot who it was, but I'll just paraphrase them. They were saying like they realized how like malicious America was like as an empire during George Bush, like his presidency, and they were saying like they just saw the cruelty of like the Iraq war and how it was a constant bombardment like from all sides, so you could not focus on one tragedy that was happening because there was 40, you know, like you can't just focus on one historical event that was unprecedented because 50 just happened and you're disorientated. So to that point, and to your point also, I think we have to have a similar tactic, and that it has to be sort of like
The advice: to achieve revolutionary
onslaught
change,
of
we have to be
different methods
diverse in our
where like
tactics.
we're spreading the state thin instead of it being so pinpointed and organized because they can see us from a mile away.
Yeah.
And that's also why we have to change.
And they have
I'm making a
endless
video
resources.
currently about the parallels between the fall of South Africa, the fall of Jim Crow in America as it currently stands, and did I say South Africa? Yeah. No, Rhodesia. So I'm making the parallels between those three, and comparing them and analysis with Israel. And for me, even though Israel's tactics are continuingly to increase, I see weakness in Israel as a state right now. It very much reminds me of towards the end of World War II, where Hitler was just going around bombing everybody because he was afraid. And that's like kind of what this reminds me of.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was an interview, was it yesterday? The days are blending together. No, it was Monday. I watched this interview on Hassan Minhaj's podcast where he was interviewing Riz Ahmed, and he's in the show Bait. He's an amazing actor. He's been in a ton of stuff. I highly recommend that show. And the interview is really informative. But Oh God, where was I going with that? We'll see if I remember.
So because of that, I started pulling from
It's
history, like,
Wednesday.
oh, like what happens when apartheid states actually fall? Like, what are things
Oh
that we can
yes,
point?
he said that the more force an entity, an oppressor, has to exert over its population, the weaker it is, like the more shaky their control is. And that's very true. It's like the best kind of control is when you have people who are propagandized and who are willingly working for the system, which is why we have to be very aware of like the tokenization or like the buy-in that many people will try to explore in order to be a counterinsurgent for the state. And so it's like I think that's a very great point, that we have to remember that as this violence escalates, not only with Israel, but the US as well, there's a reason why they are having to resort to these tactics, that they are losing control, that they don't have popular support. And even though it is scary, especially as we are engaging in direct action against these forces, that it also means that they're losing. And that's really important for movements.
And like to your point,
And
what is the
morale.
red canary? So for Jim Crow,
I don't know if that
it
made
was
sense.
the Sunday Bloody Sunday, march across the bridge in Mississippi.
Yeah.
People seeing that violence against students changed Jim Crow. Similar in South Africa, there was a bloody massacre against students that changed the political shift
Interesting.
of
It's a
people's
very clear historical
understanding of what
pattern of
apartheid was at
suppressing
the time.
youth movements.
So in both
As
of those
people are
instances,
educated, getting
including in
educated about
Rhodesia too, with
world
like the Bush Wars,
circumstances.
like people started seeing how violent the wars were becoming and the imbalances between the two. The Rhodesian army having all these weapons and the native Zimbabweans not. So that changed the shift. So unfortunately, I think violence is what is going to make people change their tactics. But I think we're also seeing it now. Like people are coming to a level of class consciousness in a way where they're seeing that like the things that we experience is also violence. It's not just like, oh, this is the way things are. People are actively choosing to hurt and harm us as a collective. So the more people wake up to that fact, I think the more things will change. But unfortunately, things have to get a little bit worse before they get better. And more people have
Yeah.
to see how bad things are.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think
And a lot of the time, people don't care about shit until it affects them personally. So that is why we are seeing even more people now, like in the US, for instance, like people who were part of the MAGA coalition start to break off. And it's too little too late, right? But I mean, it is important to have their coalition break up. So it doesn't mean that, like, oh, we're inviting people like Marjorie Taylor Greene to engage in our direct action, because, like, a lot of these people wouldn't even agree with what the kind of action is anyway. But it is important to be like, okay, these are shitty people and it's good to break up their ranks, but that doesn't mean that we are going to invite them into all of our spaces. It's understanding who you are willing to work with and who could be a detriment, especially as we are engaged in a lot of this very dangerous work at times. You need people by your side that you can trust.
What you're saying, one of the notes that I had was like looking at BLM from like its kind of conception to 2020, because I also think if I'm thinking of like Black, like, I don't know, police brutality and abolition, I still think we're in the aftermath of 2020, because I think it was such a flashpoint. But if I'm thinking of like what changed in the movement and national legislation getting some of the reforms of the demands of the earlier parts of the BLM movement, whether it be like citizens review commissions or body cameras or whatever the fuck it is, the failures of those reforms, and then the continued exposure to the public to police violence and anti-Black police violence, and how, regardless of those reforms, those videos still came out. Like, people are still getting shot in their fucking kitchens, and cops are walking free, and people that want to be public vigilantes can like basically just walk free. And how 2020, I think, almost existed partially because of the lockdown and how many people were kind of bored and inside, but also because of the exposure to all of those violences post reform, it made people feel like it was necessary. Because I do think there is the distinction between
Yeah.
mass public mobilization where like riots break out, and that can't always be controlled tactically by like one or a number or group of people. It can happen spontaneously. But I do think if we're thinking of movements where people are trying to like hold control and like to seek control, it's like interesting to your point, because I did write down like civil rights MLK and how they were trying to use nonviolence to fight for legislative change. And to your point with like Bloody Sunday, or I even think about like the Birmingham Children's Crusade, it was those tactics from the nonviolent perspective that showed the viciousness of segregation and white supremacy, and how it's interesting. It's like it's either like we have to be exposed to another level of political violence to see that a deeper and more militant reaction is necessary, or we have to choose tactics that expose the underlying truths of the system as well. We probably need to change our tactics or escalate when we can see that the state has co-opted or assimilated the demands of our movement, or the language of our movement.
Same way that the nonviolent acts of the civil rights movement exposed the inherent violence that Black people were experiencing, I think the uncommitted voters expose the inherent violence of the Democratic Party. Because look at how like insane some of these people responded to the entitlement that they had for the Muslim vote. Like, I knew it was bad for Muslim and Arab voters, but I didn't know it was that bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like like Islamophobia and anti-Arab sentiment is like on levels that like I don't remember seeing since Bush, literally.
Yeah.
Like, so
And it had that exposed the run of Kamala Harris, how she refused to condemn the genocide, how that was so utterly disappointing and harmful to the movement, and how it exposed that these feelings have always been there. It's not that it was a resurgence in it, it's that it revealed the deep Islamophobia that exists within the democratic establishment, and how there are plenty of people who have sold out to these corporations and interests that are working against the collective good for everyone. Like how there is so much money being accepted by these representatives from APAC, how they then act in ways like they already probably are Islamophobic themselves, but they act in ways that perpetuate this Islamophobia when it comes to how they are voting and the kind of legislation that they pursue, the rhetoric that they use, how it has an effect, a larger effect and influence on people around them and their constituents.
Yeah, I think we expose them. That's how we see that we need to change our tactics, and paying attention to, like you said, knowing our enemies is very important. Knowing what they are doing, what they think we're doing, all of those things are important, but not to the point of like rationalizing them like liberals do, but just to know like on a boxing level, like you my opponent likes the left hook, so I'm gonna do a right jab. That's all we're doing here.
Yeah.
Another one I really liked was, I mean, it's a part of what we're already trying to do, friends. Number 10 from Marios Kapanopoulos. I hope I said your beautiful Greek name right. How to unify leftists that are not a part of the same agenda. Disagreeing on issues like central planning or market economy, social democracy versus democratic socialism, etc. How can all these people act together without infighting? We spoke a little bit about this before, but my initial thought, why is the lack of infighting our goal? Like, I know we don't want to fight with each other, but like, we are ideologically different. So, like, yes, there's gonna be, we're not gonna agree with each other. Like I was just saying before, like, I think as long as people aren't being harmful,
Yeah.
then it's okay for us to disagree. Even people we look up to disagreed with each other. Like Asada, for instance, she left
Yeah, I think that
the Black Panther.
there we go. Didn't want to pause on that frame. Yeah, it's like what we were talking about before, how like it is expected to run up against differences when we are organizing. It's just a matter of which differences are you willing to put up with, that there are certain spaces that it is maybe a little more understandable or practical to put up with more differences, like even the example that I gave of unionizing, where you have people who should be like working towards a lot of the same thing, and that means that you can put aside some differences, or even these differences can make it so there's healthy, robust discussion, because just trying to impose our beliefs on other people is like part of the problem of these systems of oppression. And that like if there are people who don't align, just like making sure that they are directed to a space where like hopefully they can be learning more. I mean, that's not our job to be educating people in that way, but like it does depend on the situation, where like I may be more willing to work with someone who is more conservative with unionizing, especially because I live in a place like Utah where I'm very outnumbered in the comparison of like my beliefs to other people. But I wouldn't engage with these kinds of people in direct action. And so I think that distinction is important to make.
There's because she didn't think that they were radical enough for her, which is valid, but she left, you know, but they still were fighting towards the same thing, which was the liberation of all Black people.
And I also think it's in the attempt to unify, like every attempt of unification isn't going to have the same results. And so contextual, I think it's also what is your agenda? Because how do you unify leftists that are not on the same agenda? If she left the party because it wasn't radical enough, then it doesn't mean that the attempt to be a part of that party was for nothing. It means that
yes,
a political clarification was found, and that clarification ideally lets you know what direction you go in next. And I mean, it's like we could probably look at our lives and kind of look.
I think it's also important to recognize that, you know, people are dynamic human beings, that people do have the capacity for change. It's not something we should be banking on, like with the education point. But also understanding, like, I grew up LDS, I grew up Mormon. It's an extremely conservative, white supremacist religion and culture. And that, like, I have had a very adventurous like political journey because I had to do a lot of deconstructing of brainwashing, just overt brainwashing as to like what the world is like and what it actually means to fight against these oppressive powers. And so like there was a stage where I was more liberal. Like that's embarrassing for me to say now, but it also was an important part of how I got to be a communist. And that it is part of that deconstruction. It doesn't mean that like people should have put up with me in certain stages of life, that like leftists would have like should have invited me to their movements, because like I don't think that's the case. But we also have to acknowledge that like as people are engaging in the political process, especially if they have been brainwashed or were undoing this conditioning of capitalist white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, cis heteropatriarchy, ableism, that we have to allow people to grow, but that doesn't mean that like we take responsibility or have to be the ones to educate people. It's about meeting people where they're at. And if they aren't ready to engage in certain things, like, then they aren't ready, and that's fine.
Get like you're organizing with people, you think you have the same agenda, and at a certain point you realize like, oh, our agenda isn't the same. And I think there are a variety of things that can bring that to the surface. But yeah, to your point, it's like, is it infighting if we have to confront our differences, and that confrontation means I'm not going to work with you anymore, or I'm going to work with you differently? Because one of the things that I kind of wrote down as like a
What work am I
initial
willing to
thought
do with
response
my
is that
comrades, and what
I
work
also
am I
think it's
willing to
important
do
for
with people
each
that are new to
faction
me?
or area of the
Yeah,
left
it's
to
great
ask
advice.
themselves like, what work am I willing to do with my people, and what work am I willing to do with other people? Because I don't think that work is categorically the same for everyone. I think doing the work of canvassing is different than doing the work of a lockdown, or
Mhm.
anti-gentrification work, or going to city council. Like, all of those are kind of different modes of organizing. And so maybe in a sense, like, what might clarify this question is, depending on the mode of organizing, I think that's when you look at like, is your agenda the same in that particular mode? Because if it isn't, maybe you don't have unity or shared principles, and that becomes like a space where you don't do work with each other, but the shared principles are like, we don't snitch on each other to the state, we don't allow fucking Nazis in our ranks. And so I think it's in a sense, it almost feels like a case by case, because I'm like, what agenda and what course of
Mhm.
action?
And I like your initial thought about like, I think each faction or like each group should be solid on their own and like know what their values are so they can come and collaborate with others. And I think like we were talking about it a little bit, it comes with the idea of like understanding more theory than praxis. Where like you have these ideas of like how things are going to go because of history. Like obviously anarchists and communists have a pretty tumultuous history when it comes to betraying each other, etc. Especially when it comes
Yes.
to anarchists being betrayed by communists and like Spain and things like that. But people
Mm.
bring it up when we're talking about like resisting against Nazis and things like that. Like, but if a communist and I have a equal common enemy, I see no problem with organizing with them.
Yeah.
You know, like, but will that mean that they'll come to my black bloc meeting where we're going to like do something else more serious where I need to know and trust everybody?
See, that's what I was saying. But they're saying it in a much more well thought out way. Speaking of Black Bloc, I want to go over that tomorrow. So stay tuned.
Probably not, but
Yeah.
can they come to the event where we're trying to make the alt-right leave this neighborhood? Yeah, like,
Yeah.
yeah, to your point, I think it really depends on what it is and what y'all are doing, and just having wherewithal in relation to that. Like, there are people that will be considered like our acquaintances in this, and that's like all there will be. It's just like somebody, like a comrade in the struggle, like not a deeper relationship that like you can trust them. You know, it might just be like, oh, that's somebody I see at actions and they have my back. And like that's where it could stay, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also just even interesting in like the purely social sense. Like, there are people in my life that have stayed relatively politically the same, or like their agenda has been the same the whole time I've known them. And there have been people that their agenda or the tactics or the ways that they express themselves have gotten more serious and more committed and militant. And so I think it's also trying to figure out how to exist in a space where you hold certain boundaries around interacting with the state or people that are fucking harmful in their ideologies, versus like knowing when to just disagree, when you don't want to do certain kinds of work with people, and then also knowing like when certain work is possible. And I think all of that is complicated in case by case community work. And so yeah, I think it's just, yeah, there's no one answer.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think ultimately people can't avoid the hard work of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like these are all very deep and thoughtful questions, but some of them really it's just like you have to do it and be willing to get messy, like Miss Frizzle said, like make mistakes, get
Mm.
messy, like
I love that
that's
Miss Frizzle
literally the only
reference.
way. And like you said before, Prince, like that's the only time you'll really figure out if you are ideologically like aligned with someone or not,
Mm.
is if you get to talk to them. You
Yeah.
like you're around them all the time. Like somebody could tell you that they like Karl Marx or whatever, but then you hear them say something that is against those values in passing, you can maybe confront them on it or challenge them on it, you know? Like, it's never gonna be like how it is in the internet where it's like a drive-by sort of.
Yeah. Another question that I saw on the list that I thought would be good to kind of answer, number 9. So yeah, the one right above it, it's at Eli of the Forest. How to form mutual aid groups from friends and mutuals, how to establish goals to guide the group, and making sure people are safe when organizing. I feel like this is like a very big, comprehensive, but also like very useful question. And I feel like you've been doing a lot of mutual aid work recently.
Yeah, I think this is a good one, especially when it talks about friends and mutuals. Like that's how I started organizing, honestly. And I've talked about it previously, and so
I love
have
that.
you all at the dugout. Like organizing does not have to be like a big thing.
That can
You
be in a
forming a mutual
personal
aid group could
network.
literally be like you and your friends doing Sunday dinner,
Mhm.
and everybody pools their $10 that they have, and y'all all buy groceries together, and you cook together on Sunday. You have a community meal, and you share space with each other. Like that can start something massive. Like
Yeah.
if you wanted to scale up that big, you can, but like that also is mutual aid. So think about it that way when you're talking about how to form groups from your friends and your mutuals. Think about what your needs are, like in your friend group.
Yeah.
Are y'all all queer? Do y'all need access to like reproductive health
Well,
stuff,
yes.
like condoms and Plan B and stuff like that? Okay,
Mhm.
well, everybody pull their shit together and then somebody hold it somewhere. So then y'all know, okay, I can go to so and so's house. I know Plan B is there. I can pick up my Plan B. Just stuff like that. Like it doesn't have to
Yeah,
be
I
a
love that.
big, elaborate thing. When you're starting out with your friends, it could be just meeting you and your friends where you're at and like meeting the needs of your community there and building from there. Um, and to the second part of the question is like how to establish goals. That I think is better to do once things start to get in like a rhythm of stuff. Like
Yeah.
if y'all have been doing maybe your Sunday dinners for a couple months and now it's getting bigger, now I would say, okay, like get a signal group or a group chat together so y'all could actually start doing more elaborate things or planning more in depth. And then to answer the last part of your question, to make sure people are safe when organizing, if you're out doing actions, don't go by yourself. If you go by
Yes.
yourself, make friends with somebody. There will be a friendly
Mhm.
face there that you will be able to trust. But I would
Yeah,
highly
that's
advise
great
you
advice.
going with someone off rip. That's very important because um you may need to turn off your cell phone. You may be in contact with the cops or something like that. It's just better to have somebody who has your back in relation to stuff like that. And look into encrypted forms of communication. Email, text, if you guys are going to be doing more serious, more disruptive actions, it's better to get offline.
The intention of the mutual
Yes.
aid is like a big thing to kind of figure out in the beginning because I do think like
This is something that I say, but our phones are spies. Yeah, don't look suspicious. Yeah, exactly. Like, don't draw attention to yourself. Yeah, we need to really, I think, reconsider our relationship to our phones. I know this may be like an unpopular opinion, but especially as we are in an even more surveillance state than we have been in the past, that means that there's more opportunity for us to be surveilled and for these oppressive powers to take action against us. And that if we can have more like in-person interactions or by going through these encrypted channels, that it ensures that it's not going to be intercepted by feds.
if it's something that's totally legal, but maybe it's in a context of like it's alongside other kind of movement work. Like I'm thinking of like food not bombs or legal fundraising or the potential for RICO charges, racketeering charges, like not to like go to the worst possible case scenario, but I'm thinking in terms of the safety question, like if you're organizing resources for people that are going through shit and are targeted, like I think those are considerations you should have, how you gain resources, how
I've
you
been
share
learning
them with people.
ASL,
Is it
honestly,
trackable?
around phones. I
And
love
so
that.
one, I think about
Yeah,
that, but
I
I think
agree.
it's
I
and then
think
the
it's to that
establishing
point.
goals, call a
We really
meeting, you
need
hold
to
space with
be
people
careful
together,
about
you
how
figure
we're
out what an
using our
agenda
phones and
is, you figure
when,
out
or just
what you
like
need to work
turning
through
them
in the time
off,
and space that you have,
even, especially when
and
we're
you try
having
to
certain
be
kinds of
efficient or
conversations, being
clear
at certain
or
meetings.
whatever it is about what you're materially trying to do. And I think it's also important to have goals that are like quantifiable. You might want to start off with like,
But I love
we
that
want to
tactic.
practice
I've been
serving
thinking about even
meals
like
to
learning
folks in
Morse
our community,
code.
like, or passing out food
Like, so many
twice a
people
week
don't know
or
it
twice a
now
month, and
that
then kind of
it
scaling
may
up from
be
there.
useful.
But I think to your
Who
safety
knows?
question, like if you're doing the more precarious modes of mutual aid
The more
or
we can do like
organizing, or you're
effective
raising for like
communication
legal funds, or
offline,
it's like large amounts of
the
money
better,
or
I think.
resources, look up the
But I mean, it does
legal
have its
and
uses. We just need
like
to be
political
careful.
ramifications of that. Like maybe consult with a lawyer, like figure out the ways that you can build in those processes, like you said.
I always like to explain to people that like we've been doing mutual aid, we just didn't know what it was called. You know, like when you help your friend,
Yeah,
pick them up from the hospital when they have surgery, that's, you know, that's mutual aid and community care. Like that's being a friend, but that also is
I think
mutual
the
aid and
term
community
mutual
care. Like
aid
we're doing
can
that
be
already.
intimidating for
So
people.
I think demystifying it will help people too, where they
Yeah.
realize like, oh, I can do a potluck with my friends, you know, like it's really that simple. And then add books. Now it's a potluck and y'all read books about theory there.
Yeah.
See, now you have a book club. So yeah, just have
Cute.
fun
I
with
love
it
that.
and build up, because ultimately it's about community and helping and supporting each other. So it doesn't have to be like super duper serious unless y'all are doing like super serious work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Gonna
if y'all
do
just
like
have fun.
yeah, and I think it's like there's mutual aid is such a big topic and that's why I'm like, depends on the kind, because like some of them
Right.
I'm like, are you expropriating, or is it reparations, or is it
Right,
you're
what are we
raising
doing
money
here?
to sell lemonade? It depends.
From
Yeah, can mean a
KK.
lot of different things.
How do we make direct action accessible? How do we include people with disabilities and accessibility issues?
This is a great
So my
question.
first thought is, if it's inaccessible for one person, it's like it's not accessible to anyone.
Yes.
So for things like that,
That's what
we
inclusion
have to
means.
just be more mindful. So for instance, if there is a meeting that you all have and you feel comfortable with putting it online, make sure there's captions or a recording so people can like watch it later and read and go along at their own pace. If you have the ability to, you know, have someone who understands sign language to help sign, you should have them
Sign
be there, a part of
language.
it. If it's an in-person action, make sure there is accessibility when it comes to wheelchairs.
Yeah.
And my biggest thing is, like, I know this is like a huge point of contention on the left.
Or like if things are online, making sure that it is accessible for screen readers, that people with visual disabilities can be able to understand what's going on as well. Safety tip: masking up makes events far more accessible. Yes. Oh my God. This is something we need to be talking about a lot more. Makes it far more accessible for folks that are immunocompromised and beyond. And in addition, with all of the funding and bullshit in the US specifically with defunding all of these health programs, there aren't as many vaccines available. There aren't as many community health centers because they've been defunded. Many have had to close down. And that means that, like, just masking up in general will keep us healthier because of all of the diseases that are breaking out. And it's only going to get worse, just saying. I know that's not an optimistic viewpoint, but that's just the reality of where we're at.
Currently. But like if we are organizing together, I think we should be wearing masks. Like straight
Also, not to interrupt again, but interrupting again. It's like masking up also, like, especially at protests, at places where they are actively using surveillance, AI face recognition as well to put a database of people together that they can target. This is how they were able to target and eventually kill Alex Preddy in Minnesota. And this means that when we are masking up, it keeps people safe, and also it helps to protect our identities, which is very important. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize how dangerous it is to just be out in the open, especially when we are engaged in more direct action.
Like, if we're in a space together, like, just put a mask on. It's fine. Like, what is it? An hour? We're just gonna be talking about doing the free fridge or whatever. Like, just put a mask on, because if we're talking about accessibility and you know, making things easy for people to feel safe, that's what we're gonna do. I remember during the beginning of all the marches that really happened in this past year because of Palestine. I kept seeing on the internet this sentiment of like a growing community of people with like long COVID who are like upset that they couldn't go to some of the protests and the actions like they want to because they have long COVID. They like
Yeah.
don't want to risk getting COVID again. And just stuff like that, where it's like, I know it's like a level of like discomfort for people, but like for me, it's like, if you are unwilling to make a sacrifice in like a small way and that way, like how can I trust you in organizing in big things?
Hello.
Like you say you
Yeah.
want to shut down the government, you can't put a N95 on for like 10 minutes for me
Well,
when you go into the grocery store. Like, how can I trust you to be my actual comrade? So that's like how I feel about it. Like, even if you don't do it in your day-to-day life like 100%, like I'm about harm reduction in the same way how it was with like during like the HIV AIDS crisis, where it's like at first people were just afraid, like queer people were afraid to touch each other, period, in the beginning. But then they started figuring out
yeah.
ways how we could still be in community with each other, still share intimacy and sexuality with each other while keeping each other safe. And that's where I'm at right now. So it's like we could still go to shows, we could still do all those things, but we have to do things that are helpful for
Guys,
others.
consider the
So if
different
that
levels
means
and types of
making things more
accessibility needs
accessible
as
for
well.
everybody, wheelchair users, people who have hearing issues, just any level of accessibility challenges, we need to amplify those. And because if somebody has that and we make it easier for them, then it makes it easy for everybody.
I think also as part of accessibility, this is something we don't talk about as much on the left, and I think we need to be talking about it more, is that we need to be explaining a lot of terms. That doesn't mean like how we were talking about like the need to educate people. That shouldn't be a burden, but like as leftists, we can be guilty of using a lot of terminology that like the lay person may not recognize. They may align a lot with what we are doing, but they don't use particular language. And so then we say like, oh, you can't be here. And it's like, I mean, again, depending on what you're engaged with, like that education may be necessary, but like using language that is accessible for people, especially in these spaces where you're getting a lot of different kinds of people, so that people with learning disabilities are able to understand certain terms. Even just like from the practical point of like using a term like praxis is very othering to like the lay person who isn't understanding this. And if you are involved in very particular direct action, you may not want to engage with someone who doesn't know what that means. But if there are people who, there may be more people who are willing to engage in work and who align, but they just don't know these kinds of terms. So it's about like understanding where people are coming from, what the situation is that you are engaging in, but also making it so that there isn't this barrier to entry in certain spaces, again, depending on the space, just because some people may not use like certain terms that are similar. And a lot of that can also be like reflective of class and education, that like if people have not had access to certain kinds of education or access to just certain kinds of education or spaces, that like they don't know what they don't know, but they may agree with all of these types of tactics. It's a matter of like doing that vetting beforehand and also trying to be aware of what you're accomplishing.
Yeah, and I will say to this question, like I think one thing that's helped me over time is like even for myself knowing that I don't always take everything into consideration, but I think one, it's important not to view being accessible just in general as like an inconvenience if you maybe don't have those particular
Yes,
accessibility
it's
kind
a
of
right.
concerns or needs. And then I think on top of that, it's just like continuing to learn and building things into your process. Like I think since COVID-19, like people being more aware of like being immunocompromised or pre-existing conditions. I think that's something that's being built into our organizing framework more. And there's going to be things in the future that I think me or other people are going to continue to learn. And I think it's just be humble, hold space, and I think like yeah, literally don't view it as an inconvenience because it is how we build a better world moving forward. I think is kind of how I look at it.
It's important to make sure
Yeah,
everybody feels
creating the world that we
safe and
want to see
supported,
in
because it
these
also
spaces.
helps bring different perspectives. Like
Yeah.
there's so much that we can learn from our comrades just because of different experiences that they have that we don't have. So we should be willing to understand that point and really lead with empathy. I think that's like the most important things, especially with most of these questions. I think overall, this is like my summary, I guess, since I know we're winding down now. I feel like in general, that's like what the left really needs. It's like we need to just stay focused and grounded in our empathy. Um and how we organize moving forward, how we protect ourselves, how we protect each other, how we keep negative people out of our ranks. Like it all is gonna have to come from a place of like leading with our heart and our mind, not just our mind and being like woke scoldy about stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I definitely feel that after this year in particular, like there's been a lot of situations where I've left certain organizing scenarios and I've been like, was I too helpful or did I offer too much or did I like ignore certain red flags? And I do think there are useful lessons we can take away in terms of like, how do we stay unified or how do you know when someone's like not as much of an ally and they're an enemy? But I also think what I've kind of learned to your point is to your kind of first point, we can have such an expectation around what being a revolutionary radical is. Do I even know what I'm doing? Offer other people empathy and also offer yourself empathy because I do think there are mistakes that are going to be made along the way when we're trying to build trust and solidarity with each other. And those mistakes don't mean that people aren't worth shit. It's just a matter of when those mistakes lead to material harm or they denigrate someone's like position or place as a human being in a space with other people and how
Yes.
I think we need to understand kind of the
Not
difference
compromising what
between
you're trying to
yeah, like
accomplish.
offering people grace and offering or holding space for like harmful or fucked up ideology. And I do think there's a very clear difference
Mhm.
and sometimes it can become
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. And yeah, one last thing is it's so true. Like that's something that I have to I really had to reconcile with them myself too about what you're saying about like is this future going to have people in it that I disagree with, and like on a fundamental level I want everybody to be okay. Like, even people I disagree with, like,
Yep.
we have nothing in common. I still don't want any harm to happen to them.
Yeah.
So, if that's the case, I have to make sure my principles are constantly realigning to that. That's like my compass, like, that's how I guide myself. So, as long as people aren't being harmful in that way, I can organize with them. We can hold space and create things together, I think.
Go check out Lucretia's channel because it's amazing and there's only going to be more amazing things coming.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you.
working, we're collabing. Thanks so much.
pal. We're here with a comrade, co-host of the Dugout podcast. If you haven't listened to it, you should. What kind of political
I need to
moment do
check
you
out
feel
their
like
stuff,
we're in?
their
And
content.
what kind of organizing do you feel like might be necessary in the years to come? I guess it's like a first question. It's a very bird's eye question, but I'm thinking of it in terms of a lot of folks might be watching this and they don't really know where to start and they might be confused about their own way of contextualizing. So I'm wondering how you'd answer that question.
I recently heard a report back from an old head around the 99 World Trade Organization protests and how much spectacle and the role of imagery and lockboxes and feeling like it was a war zone, but at the same time, then trying to have an internationalist worldview, then realizing you're not in the war zone. You're in Columbus, Cleveland, New York City, not in Cobain or Raqqa, which were having revolutions in Damascus at the same time. How there's an escalation in political violence. I do hope that that draws people into building kinds of community that makes them feel safe and open instead of falling into despair and isolation. Because you can be lonely in a group of people, but can you recognize that yourself and do something about that to change the situation and surroundings as much as one does have power, and realizing then one's powerlessness and how to obtain that, not only for yourself, but for other people. I think that can fit into a lot of different movement spaces.
Next question is, what was your initial point of radicalization? And what
Ooh.
was the distance between your initial radicalization and when you
love this
began
question.
to
I love
do
finding
community
out how people are
organizing?
radicalized.
And what kind of community organizing was that?
The first time I really considered myself organizing or like recognizing that as like an act, that it was around like environmentalism. And it was just kind of like the plain facts of everything in front of me, becoming an adult, and then realizing that things had to be done and moving through different processes, engaging with the state, community leaders, my neighbors, but all kind of in the end goal of just like recognizing this like existential threat that we have. And it was a lot of like youth-based stuff as well. Then I'd say what really radicalized me during that process was engaging, honestly, like state actors, like as like state representatives, and being and seeing the political web and being a part of it for the first time, at least
seeing it up close.
Yeah. Yeah. Like being in office room meetings with the aides and folks for state reps to talk policy and get transit stuff and more ecological conservation cores. And it's like, even if that stuff goes through, it's like building the American project and hiding over the history of colonialism, or finding different ways to wrap up the colonial endeavors that we have, and realizing, oh, maybe there are different or more expansive questions to be asking and moving around at the same time. And that just took more learning, being like, okay, who's doing work?
And this kind of leads into another question that me and Lucretia talked about a lot, because we basically worked off of a question and answer list that folks asked us online. But one question that kind of came up a few different times, and I feel like you and I have talked about this a lot in different forms, is how do you organize with people that agree on principle but disagree on method or tactics?
I find it's like, how close do you have to actually work with them? If you
Mhm.
have some of the same goals,
What is the
and
situation?
principles, that's more than you're gonna share in common with a lot of people. It's also like, is this your neighbor? Is this your family member? How much do you have to interact with this person? Is this a coworker? Like, is this labor organizing, or is this people who hate the same company and want it to stop doing something, and two different methods and tactics and strategies around an aligned goal with certain principles of even just halting the procession of the capitalist death machine in any way, shape, or form. Like, that can be acknowledged, but I think that you don't have to work with everyone. But that being said, you still have to create the point of distinction, recognize, like, of if you're gonna have your tactic, do your tactic, organize around that, get folks, propose it, modify it.
It's because I almost feel like the question almost assumes that people can't organize with each other if they disagree on methods or tactics. And it seems like some of what you're saying is like build a shared space where people can do different tactics and you aren't trying to like punish each other. One thing that me and Lucretia talked about a lot is like what, because, or at least what I was thinking is like what kind of work? Because I'm like, if I'm petitioning with you,
Not punishing each
and
other.
yeah, like that's the method we agree upon at that time. It's like the campaign can change, circumstances can change. And I also think like in this question I'm almost like, is the other assumed question is like, if someone disagrees with your method, they're going to like sell you out, or because I feel like there's almost like follow-up questions. And as long as you're not selling each other out, I mean, theoretically that's a fucking movement. But I think maybe some of what this question is kind of asking is, how do you deal with people when they try to block a certain methodology or tactic where they're coming from? But yeah, I don't know. It's an
Does it mean that there are other things for them to do, or are they going to try to tear it down because they don't agree?
Are you a supporter of more nonviolent protest or direct action, or violent direct action, or where do you fall on that line philosophically, or how have you worked through that in your life?
Both have a place, is my opinion.
Well, I mean, so the thing that comes to my head when I hear this question is like they're so much a part of the same circle.
Yes.
If you house a weapons cache or a fugitive on the run who's a political dissident, are you a part of the violent movement even though you didn't do anything, or are you a part of the nonviolent movement? I mean, because I think also about like the people who tend to do militant actions historically are also doing care work, legal work, like reproductive labor. And then how much of that is ignored and sidelined in both the binary and the question of violence and nonviolence? Because at the center of it, yeah, it's that what do we need to sustain,
and what is considered violence,
something that
especially
can
in the
grow.
face of this
Yeah, you gotta
violent
fight back.
system of
Gendered
capitalism.
nature of
Is it
revolutionary
against
work, or like our
property?
images of revolutionary work, and it's like
That certainly is not
the
violence
violence
to
is
me.
always something you do when theoretically you have nothing to lose, or when the stakes are so high.
Yep.
But then there are also different factors as to why the stakes are so high. Like when we were watching Judas and the Black Messiah, and that was like an episode on the dugout, like one thing that I thought was nice was that Fred Hampton's partner, Erica, what was her name? Fred Hampton's partner in the movie, what's her name? Deborah. When we were watching Judas and the Black Messiah, or like when you watch a lot of revolutionary film or depictions of revolutionary processes, there's always the point where it's like, if it's a couple, the woman gets pregnant and then the guy's like, we need to fight the revolution, and then she's like, what the fuck are we gonna do about our kid? And I guess I think about like what you're speaking to is like the conflict between what do we need, what is
That's true.
necessary to do now
That's a
versus
theme
what is
that occurs
necessary
a
to
lot
do
in these
in
types
terms
of
of like
pieces.
this personal or interpersonal or collective trajectory, and like how do you weigh the differences? And then I also think like with the nonviolence violence question, I think it depends on the context and what either methodology is trying to expose. Like once again, if I think about MLK, like a lot of people disagreed with this shit, but it did expose a certain kind of contradiction, which I think made it somewhat effective. In other ways, on a personal individual level, it made it less effective for certain people. And then like going to a protest, there's a bunch of manarchists. They're like, fuck yeah, like, woo, we gotta do this shit. And then they leave all the people that have different levels of ability behind. And those people get arrested and charged by the state. And the able-bodied manarchists got to have their little fucking wet dream.
Yep.
Is violence worth it then?
It's kind of like in superhero movies.
There's a lot of nuance.
When they leave all the
I
damage
love that
and
they're
collateral
addressing
damage
that.
behind, and how that's been kind of a theme, especially in Marvel, which is also interesting because they managed to have a civil war about such government intervention and being the clave and save to humanity, while also platforming eco-genocidal fucking beliefs and anti-anarchist sentiments with the Border Smashers and Thanos. That just made me think of that. Communication is very important for any thing in your life, whether
like that
family, friends,
framework.
comrades, institutions, anything. Always want to be clear, concise, and safe. And whatever that means is up to you and your risk plan and your risk assessment and the safety plans that you make with those
your risk
that are
tolerance,
valuable in
and
your
that
life.
can
And
change
one
and
thing to consider
will
is
change
using
most likely
communication methods
over time
that
and what
you
your
put some thought
circumstances
into.
are.
Whether it's for the time being, Signal's a pretty fan favorite.
Mhm.
Proton can be a pretty fan favorite. There are some things that you should look into in different considerations.
Proton Mail, it's
around
encrypted email,
communication safety, but it's always
an
an
alternative to
intention that's great
Gmail.
for all levels of security and all levels of communication. It's great to have a good security culture, because good security culture is only as strong as its weakest link, which means the best way to infiltrate a good or bad community culture is by just points of communication, and that's where everybody's weakest link is, because that's how data works. Do your own research. Always do your own research, or know someone who knows how to do their own research around specific topics. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but you can know people who are good in a lot of things, and that in and of itself is a skill.
Thank you
Yes.
for being on this segment of Direct
I
Action
love that.
101.
Thank you for watching this Direct Action 101 Q&A series. Let me know in the comments what you resonated with in this video, in the Lucretia portion or the Jordan portion.
everything.
And let me know some comments you have about Direct Action.
I
And
loved
also
that.
drop some comments to let me know more questions you might have.
If you've been liking any of the political videos and breakdowns that you've seen on this channel, another place that you can go to learn more about politics, especially far leftism, anarchism, blackness and anarchism, is the Dugout podcast. Yes, I run a podcast called The Dugout. It's available on any platform that you can listen to podcasts, and there's also a YouTube channel for it. And I talk about a lot of things that are adjacent or similar to this channel. We've done episodes talking about different aspects of the Black Panther Party. We've done radical media reviews. And this year, we're doing a lot more interviews with folks that are also going to be featured on this Direct Action 101 series, including the likes of Jamal Joseph, who is a part of the Black Panther 21, or Janina Abram-Irvin, who is one of the last editors of the Black Panther newspaper, and so much more. The podcast is definitely a labor of love, and I like that it's also an alternative space for folks that like engaging on this channel to go somewhere else and learn more and binge and dive in, because there's definitely a lot to dig into. So check out The Dugout anywhere where you can listen to podcasts.
Very cool. I loved that. Okay. I'll be showing much more of this series. It's very pertinent to what is going on now, ideologically aligns with what I believe as well. Okay. So, this is my copy of the Communist Manifesto and Other Revolutionary Writings. I wanted to read some of Rousseau because we're reading for literature story time The Scarlet Pimpernel, this aristocratic propaganda that we are deconstructing through a Marxist lens, a revolutionary lens, highlighting all of the nefarious framing that they do of the common people and revolutionary action. Okay, so this is some writing by Rousseau. Discourse on the Origins and Foundations of Inequality Among Men. Our men of letters did not merely impart their revolutionary ideas to the French nation, writes Alexis de Tocqueville, reflecting on the causes of the French Revolution. They also shaped the national temperament and outlook on life. In the long process of molding men's minds to their ideal pattern, their task was all the easier since the French had had no training in the field of politics, and they thus had a clear field. The result was that our writers ended up giving the Frenchmen the instincts, the turn of mind, the tastes, and even the eccentricities characteristic of the literary men. And when the time came for action, these literary propensities were imported into the political arena. When we closely study the French Revolution, we find that it was conducted in precisely the same spirit as that which gave rise to so many books expounding theories of government in the abstract. Yes, our revolutionaries had the same fondness for broad generalizations, cut and dried legislative systems, and a pedantic symmetry, the same contempt for hard facts, the same taste for reshaping institutions on novel, ingenious, original lines, the same desire to reconstruct the entire Constitution according to the rules of logic and a preconceived system instead of trying to rectify its faulty parts. The result was nothing short of disastrous. For what is a merit in the writer may well be a vice in the statesman, and the very qualities which may go to great literature can lead to catastrophic revolutions. Okay, so that was an introduction. And now we're getting into a little bit of background of Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, born in Geneva, Switzerland, author of the Confessions, the most extraordinary autobiography in literature was... The most extraordinary autobiography? That's quite the statement. Anyway, was, whether he would have liked it or not, one of the French Revolution's ideological forefathers. Discourse on the Origins and Foundations of Inequality Among Men was a prize-winning essay that assured his fame among fellow philosophes and inspired those revolutionaries who followed with the same fondness for broad generalizations, cut and dried legislative systems, what we just read, and a pedantic symmetry, the same contempt for hard facts, the same taste for reshaping institutions on novel, ingenious, original lines, the same desire to reconstruct the entire Constitution according to the rules of logic, and a preconceived system instead of trying to rectify its faulty parts. Part philosophy, part sociology, the Discourse is an almost continuous flight of genius on the wing. Okay. In his preface, Rousseau introduces himself and the topic. Part 1, not included in this section, is speculative, compelling, if often fanciful, anthropology. Which, to be clear, a lot of these writings it's still the product of this white supremacist, imperialist perspective, even with these revolutionaries. So keep that in mind, that they are not always including everyone in their revolutionary endeavors and writings. In Part 2, Rousseau discusses the nature of the fundamental compact of all government, a contract by which both parties bind themselves to observe the laws therein expressed, which form the ties of their union. All right, this is the preface. So getting into his writing. Of all human sciences, the most useful and most imperfect appears to me that of mankind, and I will venture to say the simple inscription on the temple of Delphos contained a precept more difficult and important than is to be found in all the huge volumes of morality that have been written. I consider the subject of the following discourse as one of the most interesting questions philosophy can propose, and unhappily for us, one of the most perplexing for philosophers to solve. For how shall we know the source of the inequality subsisting among men if we do not begin with the knowledge of mankind? And how shall man arrive at the prospect of himself such as he was formed by nature through all those changes which the succession of place and time must have produced in his original constitution? How shall he be able to separate and distinguish that which is essential to his nature from what accident and improvement may have added to or diversified in his primitive state? As the statue of Glaucus, which was so disfigured by time, by the seas and tempests, that it bore the resemblance rather of of a wild beast than a god, so the human soul, altered in the midst of society by 1,000 causes perpetually recurring, by the acquisition of a multiplicity of truths and errors, by the changes happening to the constitution of the body, and by the continual jarring of the passions, hath, if I may so speak, lost its original appearance, so as to be hardly known for the same. Instead of a being acting constantly from fixed and invariable principles, instead of that celestial and majestic simplicity impressed on by its divine author, we find in it only the frightful contrast of passion, mistaking itself for reason, and of understanding totally perverted. It is still more cruel that every improvement made by the human species, removing it still farther from its primitive state, the more discoveries we make, and again, how they're referring to primitiveness, or how he is referring to it, a lot of the time has these racist connotations of being against indigenous cultures, just to be clear. The more we deprive ourselves of the means of making the most important of all. Thus it is, on one sense, from our very application to the study of man, that the knowledge of him is put out of our power. It is easy to perceive that it is in these successive changes which have happened to the constitution of man, we are to look for the origin of those differences which now subsist among the several parts of our species, all which, it is allowed, are as equal among themselves as were the animals of every kind, before physical causes had introduced those varieties which are now observable among some of them. It is, in fact, not to be conceived that these primary changes, to whatever causes they may be imputed, would have altered all at once, and in the same manner, every individual of the species. It is natural to think that while the condition of some of them grew better or worse, and they were acquiring various good or bad qualities, not inherent in their nature, there were others who continued a longer time in their first situation. Such was doubtless the first source of the inequality of man, which it is much easier to point out thus in general terms than to assign with precision the true causes of particular distinctions. Let not my readers, therefore, imagine that I flatter myself with having seen what it appears to me so difficult to discover. I have here opened some arguments and risked a few conjectures, but less from the hope of being able to solve the difficulty than with a view to overthrow some light on it, to throw some light upon it, and of giving a true state of the question. Others may easily proceed farther in the same route, without finding it very easy to reach the end of their career. For it is, by no means, a slight undertaking to distinguish properly between what is originally natural and what is artificial in the actual constitution of man, to form a just notion of a state which exists no longer, perhaps never did exist, and probably never will, and of which it is, nevertheless, necessary to have just ideas in order to form a proper judgment of our present state. It requires, indeed, more philosophy than may possibly be imagined, to enable anyone to determine exactly what precautions he ought to take in order to make solid observations on this subject. It appearing to me that a good solution of the following problem is not unworthy of the Aristotles and Pliny's of the present age. What are the experiments necessary to be made in order to discover the natural state of man? And how are those experiments to be made in a state of society? So far am I from undertaking to solve this problem, that I think I have sufficiently considered the subject to venture to declare beforehand that it would require all the sagacity of our greatest philosophers to direct how such experiments are to be made, and the influence of our most powerful sovereigns to make them, a concurrence of which we have very little reason to expect, especially attended with that perseverance, or rather succession of science and zeal, necessary on both sides to reach the end proposed. These researches, so difficult to make, and which have been hitherto so little thought of, are nevertheless the only means which remain to obviate a multitude of difficulties which deprive us of the knowledge of the real foundations of human society. It is this ignorance of the nature of man which casts so much uncertainty and obscurity on the true definition of natural justice. For the idea of justice, says Burlamaqui, is that how you say it? I'm going to look that up. Just a moment. Jean-Jacques. I'm trying to find the pronunciation for this. I'm pulling up a video. Pronouncenames.com. Bulamaki. Okay. I wasn't too far off. I can find where I was. Here we go. For the idea of justice, says Burlamaqui, and more particularly that of natural justice, are ideas manifestly relative to the nature of man. It is therefore from this very nature itself, continues he, from the constitution and state of man, that we are to deduce the first principles of natural law. Yeah, so it also, like talking about ignorance, this is ensured through these state structures, how especially like at this time, how people were not given the opportunity of an education, how they were oppressed and forced to just be working all the time to afford things. Does that sound familiar? How in this modern day in the US specifically, how we have had representatives consistently over the years defund education, how these billionaires and these Nazis essentially are buying up all of these media outlets and platforms, how they are ensuring ignorance with a lot of suppression of information, that there are many forces that ensure our ignorance. We cannot, without surprise and disgust, remark how little the different authors agree who have treated this important subject. There can hardly be found any two among the most serious writers that are the same opinion concerning it. I shall not insist upon what the ancient philosophers have advanced on this head, as one would imagine they had purposely engaged to contradict one another, in respect to the most fundamental principles, which a lot of the time philosophers are, like reacting to previous philosophers and these philosophical movements, and so it's usually like in direct contrast to what has been written before by predecessors. The Roman civilians subjected man and all other animals indiscriminately to the same natural law because they considered under that appellation rather that law which nature imposes on herself than what she hath prescribed to others, or perhaps because of the particular exception of the term law among those civilians, who seem on this occasion to have understood nothing more by it than the general relations established by nature between all animated beings for their common preservation. The moderns understanding only by the term law a rule prescribed to a moral being, that is to say, intelligent, free, and considered, as to the relations in which he stands to other beings, have consequently confined the jurisdiction of natural law to man as the only animal endowed with reason. But, as in defining this law, almost every one hath taken a different method, they have established it on such metaphysical principles, that there are very few persons among us capable of comprehending them, much less of originally discovering them themselves. So that the definitions of these learned men, all differing in everything else, agree only in this, that it is impossible to comprehend the law of nature, and of course to obey it, without being a very subtle causist, and a profound metaphysician. There we go. All which is exactly the same as to say that mankind must have employed in the establishment of society that knowledge which is, with great difficulty, and by very few persons, to be acquired even in a state of society. Yes. Not allowing everyone to have knowledge which is intentional to oppress the masses and keep them supplicant. Knowing so little, therefore, of nature, and so ill agreeing about the meaning of the word law, it would be difficult for us to fix upon a good definition of the law of nature. Thus all the definitions we meet with in books, setting aside their defect in point of uniformity, have yet another, in that they are derived from many kinds of knowledge, which by men by nature do not possess, and from advantages of which they can have no idea when they have once departed from that state. Our modern civilization begin by inquiring what rules it would be expedient for men to agree to for their common interest, and then give the name of natural law to a system composed of these rules, without any other proof of their originality than the utility which would result from their being universally practiced. This is undoubtedly a commodious way of making definitions and of explaining the origin and natural fitness of things by the accidental and almost arbitrary convenience of them. But so long as we are ignorant of the natural state of man, it is in vain for us to attempt to determine either the law originally prescribed to him or that which is best adapted to his constitution. All we can know with any certainty respecting this law is that in order to its being a law, not only the will of those it obliges must be sensible of its obligation in their submitting to it, but also, in order to its being natural, it must come directly from the voice of nature. Throwing aside, therefore, all those scientific books which teach us only to look upon men in the light wherein they have placed themselves, and contemplating the first and most simple operations of the human soul, I think I can perceive in it two distinct principles of action prior to reason, one of them deeply interesting us in our own welfare and preservation, and the other exciting a natural aversion to see any other sensible being, and particularly any of our own species, suffer pain or death. It is from this concurrence and combination which the understanding is capable of forming between these two principles, without its being at all necessary to annex that of sociability, that all the rules of natural equity appear to me readily deducible. Rules which our reason is afterwards obliged to re-establish on other foundations, when by its successive efforts to the improvements of science it hath suppressed the voice of nature. In proceeding thus, we shall not be obliged to make man a philosopher. Hi, Tiny! Welcome! Come here! Juniper's joining us. Come here! Yeah? She's contemplating if she wants to jump up here. Come here. Hi. Come on. She keeps acting like she's gonna jump up and then not. Okay. In proceeding thus, we shall not be obliged to make man a philosopher before he is made a man. His obligations toward other beings are not only dictated to him by the late and tedious lessons of wisdom, but so long as he does not resist the internal impulse of compassion, he will never hurt any other man, nor even any animate creature, except on those lawful occasions in which his own preservation is concerned, and he is obliged to give himself the preference. So this is going along the lines of that human's natural state is optimistic and moral, that it is equal, that there is this desire for equity and not seeing other people suffering or dying, and that we have these systems of power that essentially propagandize us, brainwash us, condition us to accept pain and death and suffering as just regular human behavior in life, that it's something we should come to expect. By this method also we may terminate the ancient disputes concerning the participation of other animals in the law of nature, for it is clear that being destitute of knowledge and free will, they are not recognizable to that law as they partake, however, in some measure of our nature, in consequence of the sensibility with which they are endowed. They ought to partake equally of a right to natural justice, so that mankind are subjected to a kind of moral obligation even toward the brutes. It appears, in fact, that my natural obligation to do no injury to my fellow creatures is founded less on their being rational than sensible creatures. Yeah, that, not the fact that they can think and reason, but that they feel. being common both to men and beasts, ought to entitle the latter at least to the privilege of not being wantonly abused by the former. The very study of the origin of man, of his real wants, and the fundamental principles of his duty, is besides the only proper method we can take to obviate a number of difficulties which present themselves on the origin of moral inequality, on the true foundations of the body politic, on the reciprocal rights of its members, and many other similar topics equally important and obscure. In taking a view of human society with a calm and disinterested eye, it seems at first to present us only with the prospect of the violence of the powerful and the oppression of the weak, yes. The mind is shocked at the cruelty of the one, or is induced to lament the blindness of the other. And as nothing is less permanent in life than those external relations which are more frequently produced by accident than wisdom, and which are called weakness or power, riches or poverty, all human establishments appear at first glance to be founded merely on moving banks of quicksand. By taking a nearer survey of them, indeed, and removing the dust which surrounds the edifice, we may perceive the immovable basis on which it is raised, and thence learn to respect their foundation. Now, without a serious application to the study of man, his natural faculties, and their successive development, we shall never be able to make these necessary distinctions, or to separate, in the actual situation of things, that which is the effect of the divine will, from the improvements attempted by human art. From the improvements attempted by human art. The political and moral researches, therefore, to which the examination of the important question before me leads us, are in every respect useful, while the hypothetical history of governments affords a lesson equally instructive to mankind. In considering what we should have been, if left to ourselves, we should learn to bless that being whose gracious hand, correcting our institutions and giving them an immovable basis, hath prevented those disorders, which otherwise would have arisen from them, and caused our happiness to proceed from those means, which seem calculated to involve us in misery. So essentially, this is the summary, layman's summary, talking about how people are equal, that our natural state is not to be fighting with one another. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I agree with, we're all equal, obviously. But that it is not the natural state of things to create these hierarchies of human dignity, that all people, even or especially in this situation, the common people, deserve dignity. Part 2. Oh wait, we have a little ending in Latin. Quem tu Deus esse, iusit et humina, qua parte locatus as in re dice. My Latin is bad. I don't know how that was. Which means, learn what part God has ordered you to play, and at what point in the human commonwealth you have been stationed. So this is directly contradicting the divine right of kings. How Louis XVI, all of the kings, but how in this particular situation and era that Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, they were propped up because of this idea of the divine right of kings, that God has chosen him as his anointed to rule over other people. And Rousseau is saying, no, that's unnatural. And a real God, if we believe in one, actually views us all as needing to have freedom. Okay. Part 2. The first person who, having enclosed a piece of ground, bethought himself of saying, "This is mine," and found people simple enough to believe him, was the real founder of civil society. Interesting that it's talking about founding of society is essentially owning things. Is this the social contract or what book? Oh, this is Discourse on the Origins of Inequality, an essay by Rousseau. Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Hello, Froggy Mano. Did I say that right? Welcome. Okay. From how many crimes, battles, and murders, from how many horrors and misfortunes would not that man have saved mankind, who should have pulled up the stakes or filled up the ditch, crying out to his fellows, "Beware of listening to this impostor. You are undone if you once forget that the fruits of the earth belong to us all," and that, like Emiliano Zapatista, those who work the land should have access to the land. I'm fucking up that quote. And that the earth itself belongs to nobody. Yes. But there is great probability that things were arrived to such a pitch that they could no longer continue in the same state. For this idea of property depends so much on prior ideas, which could only be successively acquired, and that it could not be suggested all at once to the human mind. Yeah, so talking about how, like, this idea of owning things, having domination over something non-consensually, the land, animals, other human beings, that is what society, what is known as like modern civilized society, is based off of. I'm doing quotations because we know that's not what is considered civilized society, a very colonizer mentality. Mankind must have made a very considerable progress. They must have amassed a great stock of knowledge and industry, which they must also have transmitted and increased from age to age before they arrived at this last term of a state of nature. Let us recur, therefore, still farther back, and endeavor to trace under one point of view that slow succession of events and discoveries as they proceeded in their natural order. Man's first sentiment was that of his own existence, and his first care that of self-preservation. The produce of the earth furnished him with the means, and instinct directed him to the use of them. Hunger and other appetites made him at various times experience various modes of existence. Among these, there was one which urged him to the propagation of his species, a blind propensity that, having nothing to do with the heart, produced only an act merely animal. This desire once gratified, the two sexes had nothing... Two sexes? I disagree. But, again, this is the binary. But, again, a colonizer perspective, because many other conceptions of gender, non-binary, outside of the gender binary, are indigenous. I'm not a big reader, but I enjoyed him in Social Contract. Yeah. No Isaac Asimov, but still entertaining. True. Love Isaac Asimov as well. This desire... Oh, wait, I already read that. The two sexes... There are two sexes. As I'm wearing this. Had nothing farther to do with each other, even the offspring of their embraces caring as little for its mother as soon as it could do without her. Such was the condition of infant man, such the life of an animal limited at first to mere sensations, and hardly profiting by the gifts bestowed on him by nature, much less capable of entertaining a thought of forcing them from her. But difficulties soon presented themselves, and it became necessary to learn to surmount them. The height of the trees, which prevented his gathering their fruits, the competition of other animals desirous for the same fruits, the ferocity of those who attacked his person, all these things obliged him to apply himself to bodily exercises. It was necessary for him to be active, swift of foot, and vigorous in flight. Those natural weapons, stones and sticks, were easily found. Thus surmounting the obstacles of nature, he learned to contend in cases of necessity with other animals, and to dispute the means of subsistence, even with other men, or to indemnify himself for what he was forced to give up to a stronger. In proportion as the species grew more numerous, the cares of individuals would increase. The difference of soils, climates, and seasons would introduce some difference, of course, into their manner of living. Barren years, from long and sharp winters, or scorching summers, parching the fruits of the earth, would require them to be more than ordinarily industrious. On the seashore and the banks of rivers, they would invent the hook and line and become fishermen. In the forests, they would make bows and arrows and become huntsmen and warriors. In cold countries, they would clothe themselves with the skins of the beasts they had slain. The lightning, a volcano, or some lucky incident, brought them acquainted with fire, a new relief against the rigor of winter. They next learned the way to preserve this element, then the method to reproduce it when extinguished, and at length that of using it to prepare the flesh of animals, which before they had been accustomed to devour raw. Hi. The repeated application of different beings to himself and of one to the other would naturally give rise to, in the human mind. She just keeps circling. Come here. Yeah. Come on. There we go. Rubbing her face on the book. She's like, mine. This repeated application of different beings to himself and of one to the other would naturally give rise in the human mind to the perceptions of certain relations between them. Thus, for example, the relations which we denote by the terms great, little, strong, weak, swift, slow, fearful, bold, and the like. Juniper. Knocking stuff off. Oh my god. That is such cat behavior. She comes in just to hop up here and knock off my glasses. And then leaves. What a little sass. Okay. Being occasionally and almost insensibly compared would at length produce in him a kind of reflection, or rather a mechanical sort of prudence, which indicated to him the precautions most necessary to his security. The new lights which would result from this development would augment his superiority over other animals by making him sensible of it. Yeah, of like consciousness, what he's talking about. He would now endeavor, therefore, to ensnare them, would play them 1,000 tricks, and though many of them might surpass him in swiftness or in strength, he would in time become the master of some and the tyrant over others. It is hence that man, when he first looked into himself, felt the first emotion of human pride, and this it was that, at a time when he scarce knew how to distinguish the different orders of beings, yet by looking upon himself as the first of animals, as one of the superior species, he prepared the way at a distance for assuming preeminence as an individual. Other men, it is true, were not then to him what they are now to us, and he had hardly any great intercourse with them than he had with other animals. Yet they were not neglected in his observations. The conformities which he might in time discover between them, and between himself and his female, like the possessive of that is a little bit wild, led him to form a judgment of others which might not then be perceptible. And finding that they all behaved as he himself would probably have done in like circumstances, he naturally inferred that their manner of thinking and acting was altogether conformable to his own. This important truth, being once impressed deeply on his mind, would induce him from a presentiment more certain and much quicker than any kind of argument to pursue the best rules of conduct, which he ought to observe towards them for his own security and advantage. Like, even from the perspective of self-interest, that it is a good to be looking out for our fellow man. Taught by experience that the love of happiness is the sole motive of all human actions, he now found himself in a capacity to distinguish the few cases in which mutual interest might justify him in relying upon the assistance of his fellows, and also those which are still fewer, wherein a concurrence of jarring interests might give cause to suspect it, In the former case, he joined in the same herd with them, or at farthest in some kind of loose association that laid no tie or restraint on its members and lasted no longer than the transitory occasion that formed it. In the latter case, everyone sought his own private advantage, either by open force if he was strong enough, or by address and cunning if he found himself the weakest. In this manner, mankind might have insensibly acquired some gross ideas of mutual engagements and the advantages of fulfilling them. That is, just so far as their present and apparent interest was concerned, for with regard to foresight, they were perfect strangers to it, and were so far from troubling themselves about a futurity far distant, that they hardly entertained a thought of the morrow. If a deer was to be taken, everyone saw that, in order to succeed, he must abide faithfully by his post. But if a hare happened to come within the reach of any one of them, it is not to be doubted that he pursued it without scruple, and having seized his prey, cared very little if by doing so he occasioned his companions to miss of catching the deer. People use the term "my husband" frequently. No, that's true. I think it mostly is, the thing that I'm taking issue with is like his female. But it's also talking about, from a perspective of like heteronormative ideas of like the primitive man. It's like, there were queer people back then, I'm sure. Okay. I think I'm going to stop there, but then continue some of this reading tomorrow so that we can get into the reading of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Okay. Now, oh, I forgot to go over Banned Book Club. I'll do that very quickly. Whoops. We're reading The Giver for Banned Book Club. For this section, we read chapters 16 and 17. This was after Jonas had the memory of warfare, what it is like to actually be in war. The Giver went pretty easy on him after this because that was so horrible for Jonas to experience. He hadn't experienced anything like that. He learned about a birthday party, about, quote, the joy of being an individual, special and unique and proud. He had visited museums and seen paintings filled with all the colors he could now recognize and name. In one ecstatic memory, he had ridden a gleaming brown horse across a field that smelled of damp grass, and had dismounted beside a small stream, which both he and the horse drank cold, clear water. He learns what the Giver's favorite memory is. It is of Christmas, of a family being around like the hearth, a fire, and he recognizes that there is this different level of intimacy and care that this family has as compared to his own family or the other families in their community. This is a quick excerpt on that. Jonas opened his eyes and lay contentedly on the bed, still luxuriating in the warm and comforting memory. It had all been there, all the things he had learned to treasure. "What did you perceive?" the Giver asked. "Warmth," Jonas replied, "and happiness. And let me think, family? That it was a celebration of some sort, a holiday, and something else I can't quite get the word for it." Yeah, and then he learns that it's love. The word love. He learns about grandparents, that families like stick together, and yeah, this is where he learns that it's love. "I certainly like the memory, though I can see why it's your favorite. I couldn't quite get the word for the whole feeling of it, the feeling that was so strong in the room." "Love," the Giver told him. Jonas repeated it. Love. It was a word and concept new to him. And so now he realizes what he's missing in his everyday life. And so this is him after learning about the concept of love. He is talking to his family. "Father, Mother," Jonas asked tentatively after the evening meal, "I have a question I want to ask you." "What is it, Jonas?" his father asked. He made himself say the words, though he felt flushed with embarrassment. He had rehearsed them in his mind all the way home from the annex. "Do you love me?" There was an awkward silence for a moment. Then father gave a little chuckle. "Jonas, you of all people. Precision of language, please." "What do you mean?" Jonas asked. Amusement was not at all what he had anticipated. "Your father means that you used a very generalized word, so meaningless that it's become almost obsolete," his mother explained carefully. Jonas stared at them. Meaningless? He had never before felt anything as meaningful as the memory. And then his mother goes on to say, "Do you understand why it's inappropriate to use a word like love?" Jonas nodded. "Yes, thank you, I do." It was his first lie to his parents. And then Gabriel, the little baby that's staying with them, that they're taking care of, he's also giving memories to Gabriel. He actually has the capacity to accept them. Jonas also is not taking his medication, which is supposed to help with like stirrings, which is just like arousal, horniness, as he's going through puberty. And then he starts to realize after not taking these pills that like he starts to have dreams that are more physical in nature, that he starts dreaming about Fiona, his friend, and that it makes him embarrassed and he doesn't really know why, but he also like likes the feelings, which I think is like very real to life, what it's like being a teenager, experiencing those things. He reminisces about how his family, they have this section of the day where they go over their dreams in the morning, and then at night they talk about their feelings and how the day went. And he realizes that these like feelings that his family is talking about, they aren't like the entirety of these emotions, that they're missing out on a lot of things. So, for example, Lily had not felt anger. Lily is his younger sister. And all of these people are assigned to families, so they're not biological. Assigned by the government. Jonas realized now. Shallow impatience and exasperation, that was all Lily had felt. He knew that with certainty, because now he knew what anger was. Now he had in the memories experienced injustice and cruelty, and he had acted with rage that welled up so passionately inside him that the thought of discussing it calmly at the evening meal was unthinkable. And it's very lonely for him. The more he's learning, the more he is feeling isolated because he can't relate to the people around him, and he realizes like how flat and not with depth all of their lives have. That was a weird way of saying that, but hopefully you know what I mean. And then he confronts these kids who are playing like a battle, and he, especially after recently getting this memory of war and warfare and the suffering that is involved, it really upsets him that he's like, I didn't realize this game that we were playing was mimicking war. And it says, feelings surged within Jonas. He found himself walking forward into the field, and he just stands there because he is having this flashback to the memory. And then the people around him act annoyed. They're like, you're ruining the game. And then he says to his friend, he's trying to explain why he's upset. Asher, Jonas said. He was trying to speak carefully and with kindness to say exactly what he wanted to say. You had no way of knowing this. I didn't know it myself until recently, but it's a cruel game. In the past there have... I said I apologize, Jonas. Jonas sighed. It was no use. Of course Asher couldn't understand. So he reminisces, or he thinks about how he feels a lot of love for his friends and that they can't possibly feel that back for him, and it makes him very sad. Gabe, the baby, Gabriel, is starting to actually speak. He's making some improvements because he is able to stay with Jonas. And it really is exemplary of how you don't know what you don't know. Talking about ignorance, as we were just discussing with Rousseau, that there are these larger powers that make it so we don't know what we're missing out on, whether it's in this fictional situation, or like we don't understand emotions, or we don't understand what we're missing out on when it comes to having more of a dignified life, especially when we are living under capitalism and hetero, cis, ableist patriarchy, that once we start to deconstruct these things... Hi, bud. Where'd you go? Hey. He's coming in to visit. That you realize how... Hey, what are you doing? They're fighting. I don't know why. But as we deconstruct these systems of oppression, realizing that the world doesn't have to be this way, it radicalizes us, makes us realize that there is so much that is being held from us intentionally. Okay, so moving along to the Scarlet Pimpernel. We are in England now at Mr. Jellyband's little, what is it called? Like a pub? It's called the Fisherman's Rest. And it, again, we have to reemphasize that this is aristocratic propaganda, because Baroness Orsi, she's a baroness, so surprise, surprise, she's sympathetic more to the aristocrats than the common people. That she is portraying the people who are royalists, that they are smarter and kinder and more informed about politics, that the people who are for revolution, that they're self-righteous and ignorant and don't actually know what they're talking about. So it's this bad faith framing of revolutionary thought. Okay. And so this is Mr. Jellyband talking about the revolution and what he thinks about it. "You seem to think, mine honest friend," he said quietly. Oh, whoops, that's supposed to be quietly. "that these Frenchmen, spies I think you called them, are mighty clever fellows to have made mincemeat, so to speak, of your friend, Mr. Peppercorn's opinions. How did they accomplish that now, think you?" "Lad, sir, I suppose they talked him over. Those Frenchies I've heard, it said have got the gift of gab. And Mr. Hempseed, will tell you how it is like that they just twist some people round their little finger, like." And so some of the pronunciation is meant to, like, make me speak in kind of an accent, so that's why it sounds that way. "Indeed, is that so, Mr. Hempseed?" inquired the stranger politely. "Nay, sir," replied Mr. Hempseed, much irritated. "I dunno as I can give you the information you require." "Faith, then," said the stranger, "let us hope, my worthy host, that these clever spies will not succeed in upsetting your extremely loyal opinions." But this was too much for Mr. Jellyband's pleasant equanimity. He burst into uproarious laughter, which was soon echoed by those who happened to be in his debt. Because they're like, "Oh, he's laughing. Ha 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 ha." Ha 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 ha! Ho 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 ho! Hee hee hee! He laughed in every key, did my worthy host, and laughed until his sides ached, and his eyes streamed. At me! Hark at that! Did ye hear 'em say that they'd be upsettin' my opinions? Eh? Lud love you, sir, but you do say some queer things. Same. Well, Mr. Jellyband, said Mr. Hempseed sententiously, you know what the scriptures say. Let him who stands take heed lest he fall. But then harkee, Mr. Hempseed, retorted Jellyband, still holding his sides with laughter. The scriptures don't know me? Why, I wouldn't so much as drink a glass of ale with one of them murderin' Frenchmen, and nothing make me change my opinions. Why, I've heard it said that them frog-eaters can't even speak the king's English, so, of course, if any of 'em tried to speak their godforsaken lingo to me, why, I should spot them directly, see? And forewarned is forearmed, as the saying goes. Aye, my honest friend, assented the stranger cheerfully. I see that you are much too sharp, and a match for any 20 Frenchmen. And here's to your very good health, my worthy host, if you'll do me the honor to finish this bottle of mine with me. I'm sure you're very polite, sir, said Mr. Jellyband, wiping his eyes, which were still streaming with the abundance of his laughter. He thinks he's so funny. And he is, like, such an apologist for the people who are oppressing him, the upper classes. And I don't mind if I do. The stranger poured out a couple of tankards full of wine, and having offered one to mine host, he took the other himself. Loyal Englishmen as we all are, he said, whilst the same humorous smile played around the corners of his thin lips. Loyal as we are, we must admit that this is at least one good thing which comes to us from France, meaning the wine. Aye, we'll none of us deny that, sir, assented mine host. And here's to the best landlord in England, our worthy host, Mr. Jellyband. Toasting landlords? Okay. Said the stranger in a loud tone of voice. Hip hip hurrah! Retorted the whole company present. Then there was a loud clapping of hands, and mugs and tankards made a rattling music upon the tables to the accompaniment of loud laughter, and nothing in particular. They're just like, just drunk and laughing. And of Mr. Jellyband's muttered exclamations. Just fancy me being talked all over by any god-forsaken foreigner. What? Lud love you, sir, but you do say some queer things. Same. Again. To which obvious fact the stranger heartily assented. It was certainly a preposterous suggestion that anyone could ever upset Mr. Jellyband's firmly rooted opinions anent the utter worthlessness of the inhabitants of the whole continent of Europe. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. Okay. I thought we had much longer to go. Let's see how long chapter 3 is. Let's see how far we get, shall we? Chapter 3, The Refugees. Feeling in every part of England certainly ran very high at this time against the French and their doings. So in the previous chapter, we don't end up finding out who that stranger was, but we will. Smugglers and legitimate traders between the French and English coasts brought snatches of news from over the water, which made every honest Englishman's blood boil. Any honest Englishman? Just any royalist, you mean? And made him long to have a go at those murderers who had imprisoned their king and all his family, subjected the queen and the royal children to every species of indignity, and were even now loudly demanding the blood of the whole Bourbon family and of every one of its adherents. Okay. Like, oh, their suffering is so much worse than the common people who are starving. That's absurd. The execution of the Princesse de Lamballe, Marie Antoinette's young and charming friend, had filled everyone in England with unspeakable horror. Her friend? Okay. The daily execution of scores of royalists of good family, whose only sin was their aristocratic name. oh God, seemed to cry for vengeance to the whole of civilized Europe. Civilized, just meaning ruling class Europe. We have a footnote. Born in Turin, or Turin, in 1749, Marie-Thérèse Louise, Princess de Lamballe, became a close friend of Queen Marie Antoinette, who named her superintendent of the Queen's household in 1774. The unpopularity of the Queen affected the princess too, and without much delay she was jailed by the Convention, condemned and killed gruesomely during the September massacres. The atrocious circumstances of her death are legendary, although many of the details are probably untrue. Various narratives recount how her naked corpse was paraded through the city after being mutilated by the crowd, and how her decapitated head was put on a stake and brandished under the windows of the rooms where the royal family was jailed. I mean, that's sending a message. The paroxysm of sexual and mob violence surrounding the death of the Princess de Lamballe loomed large in the public imagination. In whose imagination, though? Of the public. Probably mostly to the ruling class. Yet, with all that, no one dared to interfere. Burke had exhausted all his eloquence in trying to induce the British government to fight the revolutionary government of France, but Mr. Pitt, with characteristic prudence, did not feel that this country was fit yet to embark on another arduous and costly war after the American Revolution, which the French were also very pissed that the Americans were not helping them with their revolution because the French helped the Americans. Just American double standards continuously throughout time. It was for Austria to take the initiative. Austria, whose fairest daughter was even now a dethroned queen, meaning Marie Antoinette, imprisoned and insulted by a howling mob. Surely 'twas not so, argued Mr. Fox, for the whole of England to take up arms because one set of Frenchmen chose to murder another. As for Mr. Jellyband and his fellow John Bowles, though they looked upon all foreigners with withering contempt, they were royalist and anti-revolutionists to a man, and at this present moment were furious with Pitt for his caution and moderation, although they naturally understood nothing of the diplomatic reasons which guided that great man's policy. Yeah, they are royalists, very clearly. By now, Sally came running back, very excited and very eager. That's Jellyband's daughter. And they describe her as being buxom, which is an old-fashioned word for meaning like curvy and busty. The joyous company in the coffee room had heard nothing of the noise outside, but she had spied a dripping horse and rider who had stopped at the door of the Fisherman's Rest, and while the stable boy ran forward to take charge of the horse, pretty Miss Sally went to the front door to greet the welcome visitor. "I think I seed my Lord Antony's horse out in the yard, father," she said as she ran across the coffee room. But already the door had been thrown open from outside, and the next moment an arm, covered in drab clothing and dripping with heavy rain, was round pretty Sally's waist. Okay. Just non-consensually. While a hearty voice echoed along the polished rafters of the coffee room. "Aye, and bless your brown eyes for being so sharp, my pretty Sally," said the man who had just entered, whilst worthy Mr. Jellyband came bustling forward, eager, alert, and fussy, as became the advent of one of the most favoured guests of his hostel. "Lud, I protest, Sally," added Lord Antony, as he deposited a kiss on Miss Sally's blooming cheeks. Okay, the non-consensual actions just continue. And this, especially back in this day, was supposed to be like, oh, you should be flattered that he's giving you this attention. He's a lord. But you are growing prettier and prettier every time I see you. And my honest friend Jellyband here must have hard work to keep the fellows off that slim waist of yours. Oh my god. What say you, Mr. Waite? And Mr. Waite is the person that she was flirting with earlier. Mr. Waite, torn between his respect for my lord and his dislike of that particular type of joke, only replied with a doubtful grunt. Lord Antony Dewhurst, one of the sons of the Duke of Exeter, was in those days a very perfect type of a young English gentleman. Tall, well set up, broad of shoulders, and merry of face. His laughter rang loudly wherever he went. Ah, yes, because when our oppressors have a great laugh and they're jovial, that makes their oppression so much better. A good sportsman, a lively companion, a courteous, well-bred man of the world, with not too much brains to spoil his temper. Oh my god. That has a better temper because he is not that smart. He was a universal favorite in London drawing rooms or in the coffee rooms of village inns. At the Fisherman's Rest, everyone knew him, for he was fond of a trip across to France, and always spent a night under worthy Mr. Jellyband's roof on his way there or back. He nodded to Waite, Pitkin, and the others as he at last released Sally's waist and crossed over to the hearth to warm and dry himself. As he did so, he cast a quick, somewhat suspicious glance at the two strangers who had quietly resumed their game of dominoes, and for a moment a look of deep earnestness, even anxiety, clouded his jovial young face. But only for a moment. The next he had turned to Mr. Hempseed, who was respectfully touching his forelock. "Well, Mr. Hempseed, and how is the fruit?" "Badly, my lord, badly," replied Mr. Hempseed dolefully. "But what can you expect, with this 'ere government favourin' them rascals over in France, who would murder their king and all their nobility?" What? Mr. Hempseed I thought was for the revolution. So now he's just, like, changing sides because he's talking to a royal person? A noble person? "Odds life!" retorted Lord Antony. "So they would, honest Hempseed. At least those they can get a hold of, worse luck. But we have got some friends coming here tonight, who at any rate have evaded their clutches." It almost seemed, when the young man said these words, as if he threw a defiant look towards the quiet strangers in the corner. "Thanks to you, my lord, and to your friends, so I've heard it said," said Mr. Jellyband. But in a moment, Lord Antony's hand fell warningly on mine host's arm. "Hush," he said peremptorily, and instinctively, once again, looked towards the strangers. "Oh, Lud love you, they are all right, my lord," retorted Jellyband. "Don't you be afraid. I wouldn't have spoken, only I knew we were among friends. That gentleman over there is as true and loyal a subject of King George as you are yourself, my lord, saving your presence. He is but lately arrived in Dover, and is setting down in business in these parts." "In business? Faith, then it must be as an undertaker, for I vow I never beheld a more rueful countenance." "Nay, my lord, I believe that the gentleman is a widower, which no doubt would account for the melancholy of his bearing. But he is a friend, nevertheless, I'll vouch for that. And you'll own, my lord, that who should judge of a face better than the landlord of a popular inn?" "Oh, that's all right, then, if we are among friends," said Lord Antony, who evidently did not care to discuss the subject with his host. "But tell me, you have no one else staying here, have you?" "No one, my lord, and no one coming either, leastways." "Leastways? No one your lordship would object to, I know. Who is it?" "Well, my lord, Sir Percy Blakeney and his lady will be here presently, but they ain't a-going to stay." "Lady Blakeney?" queried Lord Antony in some astonishment. "Hi, my lord. Lord Percy's skipper was here just now. He says that my lady's brother is crossing over to France today in the Daydream, which is Sir Percy's yacht. Of course he has a yacht. And Sir Percy and my lady will come with him as far as here to see the last of him. It don't put you out, do it, my lord?" No, it doesn't put me out, friend. Nothing will put me out, unless that supper is not the very best which Miss Sally can cook. Oh, God. And which has ever been served in the Fisherman's Rest." "You need have no fear of that, my lord," said Sally, who all this while had been setting table for supper, and very gay, same, and inviting it looked, with a large bunch of brilliantly colored dahlias in the center, and the bright pewter goblets and blue china about. "How many shall I lay for, my lord?" 5 places, pretty Sally, but let the supper be enough for 10 at least. Our friends will be tired, and I hope hungry. As for me, I vow I could demolish a baron of beef tonight." "Here they are, I do believe," said Sally excitedly, as a distant clatter of horses and wheels could now be distinctly heard, drawing rapidly nearer. There was general commotion in the coffee room. Everyone was curious to see my Lord Antony's swell friends from over the water. Miss Sally cast 1 or 2 quick glances at the little bit of mirror which hung on the wall, and worthy Mr. Jellyband bustled out in order to give the first welcome himself to his distinguished guests. Only the 2 strangers in the corner did not participate in the general excitement. They were calmly finishing their game of dominoes, and did not even look once towards the door.
"Straight ahead, Comtesse, the door on your right," said a pleasant voice outside.
"Aye, there they are, all right enough," said Lord Antony joyfully. "Off with you, my pretty Sally, and see how quick you can dish up the soup." Stop ordering her about. But me saying that is not going to stop it. The door was thrown wide open, and preceded by Mr. Jellyband, who was profuse in his bows and welcomes, a party of 4, 2 ladies and 2 gentlemen, entered the coffee room. "Welcome! Welcome to old England," said Lord Antony effusively, as he came eagerly forward with both hands outstretched towards the newcomers.
"Ah, you are Lord Antony Dewhurst, I think," said one of the ladies, speaking with a strong foreign accent. Oh, whoops.
"At your service, madam,"
he replied, as he ceremoniously kissed the hand of both the ladies, then turned to the men and shook them both warmly by the hand. Sally was already helping the ladies to take off their traveling cloaks, and both turned with a shiver towards the brightly blazing hearth. There was a general movement among the company in the coffee room. Sally had bustled off to her kitchen, whilst Jellyband, still profuse with his respectful salutations, that's so humiliating that he's, so subservient, arranged 1 or 2 chairs around the fire. Mr. Hempseed, touching his forelock, was quietly vacating the seat in the hearth. Everyone was staring curiously, yet deferentially, at the foreigners.
"Ah, monsieur, what can I say?"
said the elder of the 2 ladies, as she stretched a pair of fine aristocratic hands to the warmth of the blaze, and looked with unspeakable gratitude first at Lord Antony, then at one of the young men who had accompanied her party, and who was busy divesting himself of his heavy caped coat. Who out touching their forelock? Hello, Bounce House. Which is but doesn't sound... It sounds like something else.
"Only that you are glad to be in England, Comtesse," replied Lord Antony, "and that you have not suffered too much from your trying voyage."
Oh, yes, because that's... It sure does. Yeah, exactly. Because their traveling was so arduous. It's not like, actually having to work to live.
Indeed, we are glad to be back in England," she said, while her eyes filled with tears, "and we have already forgotten all that we have suffered."
Her voice was musical and low. Oh, whoops, that was more high-pitched. And there was a great deal of calm dignity, and of many sufferings nobly endured, marked in the handsome, aristocratic face. Oh, God. Whatever that means. Which probably just means, very pale, because she's not out in the sun. With its wealth of snow-white hair dressed high above the forehead, after the fashion of the times.
"I hope my friend Sir Andrew Ffoulke proved an entertaining travelling companion, madame?"
"Ah, indeed, Sir Andrew was kindness itself. How could my children and I ever show enough gratitude to you all, monsieur?"
Her companion, a dainty, girlish figure, childlike and pathetic in its look of fatigue and sorrow, had said nothing as yet, but her eyes, large, brown, and full of tears, looked up from the fire and sought those of Sir Andrew Ffoulke, who had drawn near to the hearth and to her, and then as they met his, which were fixed with unconcealed admiration upon the sweet face before him, a thought of warmer color rushed up to her pale cheeks. Oh, because they're checking each other out.
"So this is England,"
she said as she looked round with childlike curiosity at the great open hearth, the oak rafters, and the yokels with their elaborate smocks and jovial, rubicund British countenance.
"A bit of it, mademoiselle," replied Sir Andrew, smiling, "but all of it at your service."
The girl blushed again, but this time a bright smile, fleet and sweet, illumined her dainty face. She said nothing, and Sir Andrew Andrew too was silent. Yet those two young people understood one another. As young people have a way of doing all the world over, and have done since the world began. What's a yokel? The yokels are, I'm guessing that's like the local rural people. Kind of like yeoman? Yeah. An uneducated and unsophisticated person from the countryside, according to Merriam-Webster. Good question. So really, what is happening? Yeah, of course. What's happening between Sir Andrew and this young girl is like they're just horny for each other. But it's saying it in a polite way. Oh, I was using the same voice for Sir Andrew. Whoops. I guess I'll figure out a different voice for him.
"But I say, supper!" Here broke in Lord Antony's jovial voice. "Supper, honest Jellyband! Where is that pretty wench of yours?"
Oh, God. Calling his daughter a wench, which at the time could mean, like a server, like a waitress type, like cooking in the kitchen, but also it could mean a sex worker.
"Where is that pretty wench of yours, and the dish of soup? Zooks, man, while you stand there gaping at the ladies, they will faint with hunger."
Ew. He's just like staring at them.
One moment, my lord,"
said Jellyband as he threw open the door that led to the kitchen and shouted lustily,
"Sally! Hey, Sally there! Are you ready, my girl?"
Sally was ready, and the next moment she appeared in the doorway carrying a gigantic tureen, from which rose a cloud of steam and abundance of savory odor.
"Odds my life! Supper at last!"
ejaculated Lord Antony. Back in the day, that word meant like exclaim, but yeah, I guess that would fit with the forelock theme. Lord Antony ejaculated merrily as he gallantly offered his arm to the Comtesse.
"May I have the honor?"
he added ceremoniously as he led her towards the supper table. There was a general bustle in the coffee room. Mr. Hempseed and most of the yokels and fisher folk had gone to make way for the quality and to finish smoking their pipes elsewhere. Only the two strangers stayed on, quietly and unconcernedly, playing their game of dominoes and sipping their wine. Whilst at another table, Harry Waite, who was fast losing his temper, watching pretty Sally bustling round the table. Yeah, because he likes her and doesn't like that she's getting attention from other men. She looked a very dainty picture of English rural life, and no wonder that the susceptible young Frenchman could scarce take his eyes off her pretty face. The Vicomte de Ternay was scarce 19, a beardless boy on whom terrible tragedies which were being enacted in his own country had made but little impression. He was elegantly and even foppishly dressed. Oh, same. Jealousy from men? No. Exactly. Feeling possessive over women? And grabbing them non-consensually? What? Patriarchy? Okay, I'll continue. I love a fop. I'm foppish. And once safely landed in England, he was evidently ready to forget the horrors of the Revolution in the delights of English life.
"Pardi, if this is England,"
he said as he continued to ogle Sally with marked satisfaction. Ew,
"I am of it satisfied."
Of course you are. What is it to be foppish?
I've heard so many. Yeah, because we're delving into the past. This is why I come off as being like out of time sometimes with the way that I speak, because my vocabulary was like, I was like raised by shit like this as an escape in Utah. Foppish, I'm gonna get an exact definition for this, but it means like a dandy, like a very fancy, fashionable man, but it kind of has this connotation of queerness, of almost like femininity. Concerned with one's clothes and appearance in an effective and excessive way, typically used of a man. Yeah, it has the connotation of like queerness. Which, same. Okay. It would be impossible at this point to record the exact exclamation which escaped through Mr. Harry Waite's clenched teeth. Only respect for the quality, and notably for my Lord Antony, kept his marked disapproval of the young foreigner in check. "Nay, but this is England, you abandoned young reprobate," interposed Lord Antony with a laugh. "And do not, I pray, bring your loose foreign ways into this most moral country." He's like, don't be sleeping around. Even though he's acting non-consensually, like he's being an aggressor himself. Lord Antony had already sat down at the head of the table with the Comtesse on his right. Jellyband was bustling round, filling glasses and putting chairs straight. Sally waited, ready to hand round the soup. Mr. Harry Waite's friends had at last succeeded in taking him out of the room, for his temper was growing more and more violent under the Vicomte's obvious admiration for Sally. "Suzanne," came in stern, commanding accents. Oh, nope. From the Comtesse. Countrymen who uphold the utmost of morality. Exactly. Yeah, the British Empire and its royal class. "Suzanne," came in stern, commanding accents from the rigid Comtesse. Suzanne blushed again, for she had lost count of time and of place while she had stood beside the fire, allowing the handsome young Englishman's eyes to dwell upon her sweet face, and his hand, oh no, as if unconsciously to rest upon hers. Okay, so that's better. Her mother's voice brought her back to reality once more, and with a submissive, "Yes, Mamma," she too took her place at the supper table. Okay. That's the end of chapter 3. We're able to get through the rest of 2 and finish chapter 3. All right. Tomorrow, I'm going to be calling this architectural firm that helped build a labor camp for displaced people in Utah. It's a concentration camp, and it is immoral. So I'm going to be calling them on this stream and asking them some pointed questions if you're interested in observing that. Because I don't want to give them an opportunity to like come up with like a manufactured statement of some sort, like with lawyers and shit. So I'm going to be doing that, and then also calling the Department of Homelessness in Utah. We'll see if I can actually get them on the phone. And I'm also not going to let them have time to respond because I used to work for the state government. Sadly, I was pushed out because of this and for actually having opinions and talking about shit. So I'm going to call that department, and then there's another one that I need to remember to look up. Some may consider this gotcha journalism. I don't claim to be a journalist, so I don't care. So that's what I'm going to do, because I think we need to use tactics like this to hold people accountable. We'll see how that goes. I don't know what's going to happen, but
You can observe if you want. But thank you all for being here. It was really great to chat with you all. What are they called? Utahns? Utahnians? Utahns. But, I mean, who cares? I don't claim this state. I mean, I was like born here and ended up living here, unfortunately. But yeah. Utahns, that's how you spell it too. Okay. Shall I send you all on a raid somewhere else? Does anybody know of a streamer that's on right now that doesn't have like egregious viewpoints? Like anyone you think? Aha. Androgynous water. Thank you. I'm going to... We have another day then. Cute. Here we go. Let's see if this works. Invalid. Maybe I just have to search for them. Read. Okay, I'm gonna pull up the browser and see if I can find them there. Androgynous. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Go be nice. Behave. It was great chatting with you all. I will be on tomorrow, so I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, and I will see you soon. Cheers to you. Okay, we have a countdown. 2, 1...